In a hospital emergency room nightmare, first-year resident Yi Young found herself thrust into the role of lead surgeon for a patient hemorrhaging profusely. It was operate now or lose the patient. Except, Yi Young, inexplicably for a surgeon, wasn't wearing gloves. Coupled with her inexperience, she lost the patient on her first attempted surgery. The weight of the situation crashed down on her, reprimands echoing in her ears until she jolted awake. It was just a dream. Relieved to find herself in a luxurious spa, Yi Young closed her eyes, ready to enjoy the pampering. The attendant suggested the premium VIP package. Yi Young, momentarily curious, inquired about the price. 1 million won plus a 200,000 won personal service fee. I'm broke, I can't pay that, she exclaimed. Her protest was met with restraints. Suddenly, she was strapped to an operating table, deemed unable to afford the service. They were going to harvest and sell her internal organs to cover the cost. Again, she woke up. This, too, was a dream, the jarring ring of her phone pulling her from the nightmare. Groggily, she answered, "I'm driving." The voice on the other end jolted her awake. It was a debt collector. Her overdraft was due, a staggering 46,000 won. Disbelieving, Yi Young pinched herself. This was no dream. The debt collector pressed for her tax information, her pay stubs. Yi Young, unemployed for months and with no intention of finding a job anytime soon, had none to offer. Threatened with legal action, Yi Young, now terrified, negotiated an extension. She had to find a job, and fast, or face jail time. The next day, Yi Young, albeit reluctantly and somewhat shabbily dressed, dragged herself to Jongno Yulj, a prestigious hospital, for a residency. Her sister worried. Yi Young was notoriously lazy and antisocial. Still, she hoped it would work out, especially since Yi Young had interned there a few years prior. Yi Young, however, harbored resentment. A friend of her father's had embezzled 50 billion won from the hospital, plunging her family into debt and forcing them to work to repay it. She dreaded returning to the scene of her family's shame. "Dad can't afford to open another hospital for you to ruin," her sister retorted. "And what hospital would take you after that fiasco a few years ago? If it weren't for me finding this placement, you'd have no way to pay off that 50 million won. Just try to stick it out," she pleaded. Yi Young sulked. "Unless you pay off your debt," her sister warned, "I'm not speaking to you again. Or you can just end up in the morgue, got it?" Her sister would be happy if Yi Young could just manage to last a year. Upon arriving, Yi Young immediately ran into Do Won, a senior resident in internal medicine B. He'd worked with her during her previous internship and knew all her favorite hiding spots for shirking work. After changing into her scrubs, Yi Young joined 3 other first-year residents in a conference room. Do Won entered with 2 other residents, Yoon Mai, a 3rd year, and Da Hai, a 2nd year. They were tasked with guiding the new interns. He encouraged everyone to introduce themselves. The first victim, Kim Sa-bai, proudly announced her impressive credentials, including top rankings in school and national exams, a textbook overachiever. Moving on to the next introduction, Do Won noticed the resident beside Yi Young seemed to be a high school classmate. However, she couldn't even recall her friend's name, mistakenly masculinizing it. Exasperated, the friend clarified, "It's Pyo Nam Kyung." Yi Young, embodying peak laziness, mumbled her name and sat down, a true energy conservationist. Finally, it was the eagerly awaited turn of the laid-back resident. He'd managed to put his scrubs on backward, earning a reprimand from Do Won. This slightly clueless individual, Yi Il, went by the nickname Day, meaning a fleeting moment of glory. Better than no glory at all. The 2 senior residents perked up, asking if the nickname was a reference to a famous singer. Yi Il's flailing gestures left everyone unsure which idol group he meant. Truly, a generation of goofballs entering residency. "Just get on with it," Do Won sighed. "I'm busy." Yi Il declared, "I may not be book smart, but I'm good with my hands. Exploit me. I'm built for it." After the meeting, Nam Kyung pulled Yi Young aside. "There's one thing you need to watch out for in our department," she warned. Seo Young Min, the obgyn surgeon. They call her the witch. As fate would have it, Yi Young's first assigned surgery was with Dr. Min. Nam Kyung was shocked. "You've got some seriously bad luck," she commiserated. "Brace yourself. The witch will tear you apart with her words." In the operating room, Dr. Seo Young-min was informed a first-year resident would be assisting. She prepared to assert her authority, but was surprised to find Yi-young already aware of her reputation. Good intel, she conceded. Her attempt at intimidation thwarted. Was everything appearing blurry, like Yi-young's career prospects? It actually was blurry. Yi-young hadn't removed the protective film from her surgical glasses. This generation of clowns was a hazard to patients. The other first years weren't faring much better. Ma'am Kyung was more terrified of operating than the expectant mother. Yi-il peppered the patient with questions, meticulously documenting every detail, then relayed it all to a progressively more irritated Da-hai. "These are all normal signs," she exclaimed. "Why are you reporting every single thing?" Yun-mai, observing the scene, muttered. "Is that the first year?" He had one redeeming quality, diligence. His fatal flaw, reporting everything. The final member of the first-year cohort, despite being the overachiever, had a habit of bluntly pressuring patients into signing surgical consent forms, terrifying them. Great for the hospital's bottom line, not so much for the patient's peace of mind. Back with Dr. Young-min, Yi-young observed a suture procedure. Instructed to cut a piece of dental floss, Yi-young, in a moment of profound misunderstanding, treated it like a precious patient souvenir. Young-min ordered her to throw it away. Confused, Yi-young placed it on the instrument tray, earning another scolding. Seeking guidance, she then placed it directly on the patient, finally pushing the witch over the edge. Yi-young was banished to a corner, like a student punished for not knowing her lessons. Observing from her exile, she finally realized the precious suture was meant for the trash. Meanwhile, Yi-il continued to plague Da-hai with his observations. "I noticed a clear, white fluid coming from each patient," he reported. "I suspect it's cerebrospinal fluid leaking after surgery." Da-hai's headache intensified. "Have you ever had a runny nose?" she asked. "Ever sneezed? You get a runny nose, right?" she asked her colleague, gesturing at Yi-il. Enthusiasm he had in spades, medical knowledge, not so much. A simple runny nose, elevated to a cerebrospinal fluid leak. Meanwhile, Sabai continued her own task, persuading a patient to sign a surgical consent form. However, this time she wasn't having much luck, as the patient was terrified. Sabai seemed unconcerned with the patient's fear, simply scheduling another appointment and saying, "Next time, I expect you to sign the consent form. It's a 50% chance of survival, so what's there to worry about?" That evening, after everyone finished their internships, Yi-il received a bank card and invited the group out to dinner. Yi-young declined, saying she'd already eaten. However, her already eaten consisted of sneaking out after everyone left and nibbling on a piece of dry bread. Right after her shift, Yi-young ran into her senior, Do-won, in the elevator. He asked, "Don't you want to tell anyone about our relationship?" Since Yi-young hadn't even been there a month, she didn't want to reveal their relationship. It wasn't really important anyway. It seemed they were close, perhaps even dating. Do-won even accompanied Yi-young home for dinner with her older siblings. During the meal, he teased Yi-young relentlessly, saying, "I haven't done anything. Must be mice in the house lately." Annoyed by Do-won, Yi-young was further exasperated by her siblings' constant flirting, prompting her to tell her brother-in-law to get his heart checked. "I guess you can't live a day without my sister." Never one to miss an opportunity for banter, Do-won brought up the surgery. Yi-young, who treasured a stray suture thread like a precious gem, ended up being punished by having to stand in the corner. She hadn't even worked there for many days and was already in the professor's bad books. Yi-young's sister wondered if she was serious about paying off her 50 million won debt. The next day at the hospital, after Do-won left for his on-call duty, Yi-young got called in as well. Despite trying to avoid it by claiming she wasn't a doctor, everyone knew who she was, so she ended up examining a pregnant woman. As it turned out, the pregnant woman was familiar with Yi-young. Coincidentally, she was the same woman Yi-young had helped deliver a baby for a few years prior, a woman named Young-seon. Now, this woman, Jang-sun, asked Yi-young for a favor. She didn't want her new husband to know she had given birth before, so she asked Yi-young to lie and say it was her first delivery. Left with no other choice, Yi-young agreed to go along with the charade. She wholeheartedly reassured the husband, advising him to be attentive to his wife, as first-time deliveries can be painful. Grateful, the husband gifted Yi-young a cake. She took the cake straight back to the residence room, and they shared it for dinner. Talk about being frugal. However, their meal was short-lived as they were soon called away for another shift. Yi-young went to check the pregnant woman's cervix to see if she was ready to deliver and declared that it was fully dilated. She rushed off to call the doctor to prepare for surgery. However, when Professor Young Min re-examined the patient, he found that the cervix was nowhere near fully dilated. It was only 2 cm dilated, and Yi-young had made it sound like it was the size of a cow's. The professor quipped, "Yi-young, the only thing fully dilated around here is my anger." He lamented, "This new generation of flippant workers is truly something else." Back with Sabai and the reluctant patient, she discovered that Do-won had managed to persuade the woman to sign the surgical consent form with seemingly effortless ease. She stopped him as he was leaving, demanding to know his secret and analyzing his methods with a robotic approach. Seeing her mechanical approach to everything, Do-won bluntly told her, "No matter how well you did in school, you can't be robotic here. Getting first place in consent forms isn't the point. Here, you prioritize the patient's wishes. If you're constantly looking up ways to coerce people without understanding why, you're wasting your time in this profession." Meanwhile, the intern continued to pester his senior, Cha-hai Da-hai, with the list of observations he had compiled throughout the day. Da-hai assumed he was bothering her with more incomplete and irrelevant information. However, upon hearing that he had observed the patient from 4 am to 3 p.m., and that he could clearly articulate the vital signs and conclude that the patient was likely dehydrated, Da-hai started to acknowledge his diligence and potential to contribute. However, he still forgot to prescribe medication for the patient, leaving Da-hai to ask a colleague to do it for him. Do-won wearily walked over, hoping things were going smoothly for Da-hai, since managing her younger colleague, Sabai, wasn't easy. Thankfully, things were okay, giving him some relief. At least there was someone reasonably intelligent among these first-year residents. Suddenly, Yi-young called Do-won, informing him that the pregnant patient, Young Seon, was about to give birth and needed immediate assistance. The group rushed the expectant mother to the delivery room. An emergency arose, forcing Yi-young to quickly put on gloves and deliver the baby. She hadn't expected to deliver a baby before the mother even reached the delivery room. Everything happened so fast that Yi-young didn't have time to be surprised. She burst into tears, overwhelmed by the sacredness of the experience she had just facilitated. Although reprimanded by Professor Young Min, Yi-young understood her mistake and was forgiven. The professor warned her, however, that if it happened again, she would show Yi-young what a real witch in this hospital looked like. From that day forward, Yi-young changed completely. Once lazy, she now rushed to the hospital, surprising her siblings. A person could change so drastically after a single unexpected delivery. Yi-young's sister rejoiced, believing that this time she had truly found her calling. And in every subsequent C-section, Yi-young's story was recounted as a legend in the obstetrics department. Suddenly, a woman became curious about the identity of this legendary figure. Could she have a connection to Yi-young? Over the next few weeks, the group of 4 interns was constantly working, barely having time to eat or sleep properly. On top of that, these first-year internal medicine residents had to continuously report on their patients' conditions and symptoms to Dr. Mon. Unfortunately, no one could clearly remember all the details, resulting in the entire group having to redo their reports. This Dr. Park T-Rim continuously gave the internal medicine team a hard time, whether for unknown reasons or simply to abuse her higher authority. She made everyone redo their reports over and over again. It turned out that she was a senior doctor at the hospital who had heard about Yi-young's legendary delivery. Dr. Mai devised a plan to overload the intern team with birthing cases to make things difficult for them. This plan effectively demoralized the interns in stages, forcing them to accept that survival in the hospital wouldn't be easy. However, to address this issue, Do-won believed that his interns would feel better once they received their first paycheck. The next day at the hospital, the group was so exhausted that during Professor Young Min's lecture, some dozed off while others forgot the material. Within the group, only Sabai seemed to have studied, being the consistent top student. This left Professor Dong Min frustrated, feeling like he was giving Sabai a private lesson. He decided to end the class, telling everyone to review their basic knowledge at home. He then called Yi-young to accompany him on rounds for the obstetrics cases assigned for the day. After sitting down at her desk to compile patient information, The doctor who had been harassing the interns approached Yi Young from behind and started insulting her, criticizing her work ethic as if she were an idiot. When you work, don't be on your phone. First, focus your mind on the task at hand. You show no enthusiasm for your work. Yi Young listened, bewildered, unsure why she was being scolded. Meanwhile, Yi Il wasn't faring any better. He had just begun examining a patient when he was immediately berated. The patient, suffering from cancer, had a distended abdomen due to fluid buildup, which Yi Il mistook for pregnancy. The patient complained to her attending physician. Today is really not going well at all. And now, I'm feeling quite irritated, too. Over on Sabai's side, things weren't going any better. Her patient was easily offended, sensitive to everything, and she, being blunt and incapable of flattery, was a terrible match. When Sabai told the patient she might feel a burning sensation, the patient flew into a rage, yelling, "What kind of doctor are you? You're sticking me with a needle, and you don't even warn me it'll hurt?" Sabai simply replied, "Well, it does hurt." Her bluntness worried the patient, as Sabai had no idea how to comfort or reassure her. The patient flatly told Sabai that she shouldn't be a doctor. As a result, Sabai was reprimanded by her supervising professor for her lack of tact. When told to apologize to the patient with sincerity and empathy, Sabai felt she had done nothing wrong. She had simply stated the obvious. Her supervising professor became exasperated with the intern's inability to understand. He felt like he was talking to a brick wall. If the patient transferred hospitals, he asked, who would be held responsible? Me, of course. Who else? Sabai said she would speak to the patient again to rectify the situation. He hoped she could deliver on that promise and not make the patient's condition worse. Meanwhile, Yi Il, accompanying senior resident Da Hai to see his assigned patient, discovered the patient hadn't received their breakfast as scheduled. The attending physician had to smoothly apologize for the delay, explaining the need for a slightly longer fast. Da Hai signaled Yi Il to quickly fetch breakfast. He ran into the same difficult woman from that morning, carrying his fatigue with him as he went to meet Nam Kyung. Before he could even begin to complain, she told him about a particularly challenging new patient. "My horoscope predicted I'd meet my enemy today, and it's none other than you." It turned out the patient Yi Il had mistaken for a pregnant woman earlier that morning had been transferred to Nam Kyung's care. The woman was notoriously difficult, so Nam Kyung now considered Yi Il her enemy. Talk about unhelpful friends. Just as they finished speaking, the patient arrived, like clockwork. Min Soo demanded that Nam Kyung change her bandages 4 times a day instead of 2. Reluctantly, Nam Kyung agreed, as she was obligated to as a doctor. Later, while taking a walk, Yi Il found Yi Young sadly listening to music, feeling completely overwhelmed. She confided that Dr. Young Min probably hated her, given how she was treating not only her but the entire group. Yi Il had heard that Young Min was notoriously harsh on first-year residents. This year, she was even more irritable because she was vying for Dr. Kim Dong-ju's position, who was about to retire. To comfort Yi Young, Yi Il played a song by his favorite band. Suddenly, Dr. Young Min called, informing Yi Young of an emergency case. Yi Young rushed to the operating room, where a colleague from the anesthesiology department remarked, "Just seeing you guys gives me goosebumps. Your department is incredibly frantic." Yi Young explained the critical condition of the incoming patient. Then, Dr. Park T-Rim called, saying she was bringing the patient. But they waited and waited, case after case delaying the surgery. Yi Young called repeatedly until she discovered that the critical patient she had reported had already been treated. Sang Hai-jiang, also curious, questioned Dr. Mon, having heard about the urgent surgery. But Dr. Park T-Rim denied any knowledge. "I don't know what you're talking about." Sang Hai-jiang then reprimanded Yi Young. "This is unacceptable for a first-year resident. You lied to prioritize your department's surgery. I'll have to report this to my professor." Exhausted and returning to the break room, Yi Young declared in frustration that she wouldn't do this damn job anymore. Things weren't any better for Nam Kyung, who had to cover for Yi Il and attend to a difficult patient. She accidentally brushed against the patient while wiping their sweat and was immediately and curtly ordered to change her gloves and instruments before rebandaging the wound. Nam Kyung was annoyed but complied. Yi Il wasn't having a good time either. He'd rushed to inform Senior Da Hai that a patient had disappeared, only to learn he was a step behind. The patient had been taken to the operating room hours ago. Da Hai then suggested Yi Il go rest, implying there was nothing left for him to do there, even though he had previously been invited to observe Da Hai's surgery. Sabai also faced her own share of trouble. She was reprimanded for pointlessly apologizing to a patient. Apparently, fearing she'd disturbed the patient's meal, she'd offered an apology, which infuriated the professor. With her blunt and intimidating demeanor, she was told she'd never make a good doctor. This, she was informed, was her final warning. The next day, with more surgeries scheduled, Yi Young arrived at the operating room early. However, she was completely ignored. No one asked about the information she'd gathered. Instead, she was accused of lying after the previous day's false emergency. The anesthesiology team told Yi Young, as a first year, to be honest and stop causing trouble. Unlike Yi Young, Nam Kyung found herself bickering with Nurse Ju Yeon. "I really don't want to deal with that fussy old woman," she complained. Unfortunately, the patient overheard her, leaving Nam Kyung mortified and unsure how to proceed. She pleaded with Ju Yeon to find another intern to take over, insisting she couldn't handle it. The troubles continued to mount. Yi Il was summoned only to be told his help wasn't needed. Yi Young and Sabai, dejected, sat together, commiserating and half-heartedly discussing quitting. "Are you really going to quit?" Sabai, Yi Young asked. "Or should I quit and then you can follow?" It was a classic case of Gen Z burnout in the workplace. Adding to their disillusionment, the group, known for their playful sarcasm, was already close to giving up. To tease Yi Young, Dr. Park T-Rim called her. "Giving up already?" she asked. "Well, you still need to get patient consents tomorrow. And by the way, haven't seen any photos from you lately." Yi Young immediately sent a photo report, but it was an old one. Dr. Park T-Rim, well aware of the deception, advised Yi Young to be honest and develop good habits from the start. After her lecture, the perfect doctor was satisfied and went to bed. Yi Young decided to quit. Suddenly, a code blue, an emergency from the obstetrics department, blared through the hospital. Without hesitation, Yi Young rushed to the main building, first basement, to provide aid. Professor Young Min and other doctors were already on the scene, working to get the pregnant woman to the operating room as quickly as possible. Dr. Park T-Rim arrived much later, inquiring about the situation. Professor Young Min directed Yi Young to assist, but this was actually a tactic to clear the area and confront Dr. Park T-Rim. He questioned her about her whereabouts when the code blue was called. Dr. Park T-Rim attempted to lie but was quickly exposed. The professor knew she hadn't been in surgery during his earlier procedure. Dr. Park T-Rim claimed her surgery had been postponed, and she'd gone home to sleep. The professor then used her own words against her. "By the way, you two won't be seeing each other anymore. You're fired." It was a perfect example of poetic justice. Meanwhile, Yi Young's skills in assisting with the obstetrics case were recognized, and she was offered Sabai's position. However, Yi Young's passion lay with her current department, so she declined without hesitation. Later, exhausted, the group returned to their room. Everyone asked Yi Young, "Were you really about to quit?" As if there was anything left in that hospital to keep her there. Senior John, in an attempt to boost morale, bought food for everyone, only to have Yi Young grab her share and unceremoniously shoo him away. To top it all off, Yi Il, struggling with his work performance, was in a state of temporary unemployment. The next day, it was Nam Kyung's turn to face criticism from her superiors. She was reprimanded for her supposedly inadequate wound care, specifically changing a patient's drainage dressing. To make matters worse, Nurse Ju Yeon informed her that the patient, Min Soo, had become upset with the new intern and insisted that only Nam Kyung change her dressing. Left with no choice, Nam Kyung reluctantly went to attend to Min Soo. The patient demanded that only Nam Kyung perform the dressing change, threatening to report her to her professor if she refused. Meanwhile, Yi Young, off-duty but denied any respite, was given a new task by Do-won to pick up a pregnant woman in distress. He instructed her, "If the baby starts to come out on the way, clamp the umbilical cord first and then cut it with sterilized scissors. You'll be handling the delivery alone." Do-won reassured her that everything would be fine, but the weight of the responsibility was heavy. By lunchtime, Nam Kyung looked exhausted and hadn't even had time to shower. Mid-meal, she was called about another issue with Min Soo's dressing and drainage. Snapping, she yelled, Tell her to find someone else or do it herself. I quit. She stormed off, crying, vowing to return to her hometown and take up farming. Her tears didn't last long. A message arrived that surprised her, prompting her to call the driver to turn around. Rushing back to Min Su's room, she found it empty, save for a few belongings left behind. Nam Kyung broke down, sobbing. I only changed her dressing once today. Let me do it one last time. Suddenly, Min Su appeared, having only moved rooms and forgotten her glasses and a book. Nam Kyung's despair instantly turned to relief, tears of joy mixing with the remnants of her earlier distress. Thankfully, she hadn't acted on her impulse to quit. Even better, Min Su was being discharged the next day, sparing them further interaction. The patient apologized for being difficult, encouraging Nam Kyung to continue being a good doctor. Meanwhile, Yi Young successfully transported the pregnant woman to the hospital, though she was understandably anxious and exhausted from the experience. After a wait, Do Won's colleague appeared, handing her a file and inquiring about the patient's condition. Thanks to Yi Young's encouragement during the transport, the woman was now stable. You must have been terrified, he remarked. Before she left, he instructed her to deliver the file to Do Won that same day. Back at Yulj Medical Center, Professor Young Min pulled Sa-bai aside for a talk about her work and personality. If you can't do it, don't do it, he advised. Try working in a different department. Sa-bai remained stubborn, still determined to win over patients. However, she fell asleep, snoring loudly, outside a patient's room, waking Mrs. Chiol. True to form, Sa-bai later delivered an insensitive late-night monologue about unfavorable medical outcomes, prompting Mrs. Chiol to snap. Do you have any sense of timing? It's the middle of the night. Can't you let me sleep? As Sa-bai turned to leave, Mrs. Chiol collapsed. Sa-bai immediately called for help and rushed her to the operating room. Fortunately, Mrs. Chiol delivered a healthy baby. Seeing Sa-bai, the doctor who had delivered her child, she confessed, I almost gave up on being a doctor, like Mrs. Chiol told me to. But I really want to be a doctor. Mrs. Chiol then said, Then be a doctor. I'm not trying to discourage you. I was just worried because you scared me so much. No other doctor is like you, Sa-bai. You open your mouth and people are afraid to have surgery. She then shared a painful memory. I was pregnant with twins, but one of them died in the womb. I bought all these matching baby clothes but couldn't sell them because they belonged to my deceased child. She continued, Now, I've decided to try for another child through EVF. I hope you, Sa-bai, will be the one to deliver my baby. Meanwhile, Yi Young had taken a file from a colleague at another hospital to Do Won. When he opened it, he found it empty, immediately understanding the implied message. While Do Won was briefly away, the anesthesia department staff berated Yi Young. They blamed her for getting them reprimanded for supposedly reserving an operating room unnecessarily. They even criticized her for not knowing the difference between general and local anesthesia. It was clear they were just piling on Yi Young without investigating the situation. Dr. Kim challenged her. Don't you remember what you said? Just then, Do Won returned and told Yi Young to repeat what she had said earlier. Yi Young complied. I said, Miss Jang Min Hwa's heart rate is unstable, so please use general anesthesia. Do Won confirmed that he had relayed the exact same message, prompting Dr. Kim to question Sang Hai Jeong. Why did you prepare the wrong anesthesia then? Do Won added. If you have a problem with the standard terminology used by the entire department, take it up with the professors. Dr. Kim retorted. Every time Yi Young is involved, something goes wrong. Like that emergency surgery with the non-existent patient. Do Won firmly stated, I would never teach my residents that way. Sang Hai Jeong admitted she had asked Goat, a nickname presumably for another resident, as he was with Yi Young that day. It turned out Dr. T. Rim was the one who had falsely informed Yi Young about the emergency surgery. Finally, the misunderstanding was cleared. Yi Young had been set up and unfairly blamed. After work, Do Won's colleague called to say how much she liked Yi Young. Thanks to her, my patient arrived safely and received surgery. Please don't be too hard on your junior. As soon as he hung up, Yi Young appeared, looking brighter than ever. She wanted to thank Do Won for his support, but he brushed it off. He simply reminded her to keep working hard, as she still had a 50 million won debt to pay off. Later, as the residents gathered in their room, they received a call informing them they no longer needed to report everything to Dr. T. Rim. Additionally, their delivery and surgery schedules were eased, allowing for some much-needed rest. The group celebrated by going out for spicy ramen. It turned out Do-won had made a deal with the manipulative Dr. T-Rim. He was simply looking out for his junior colleague. The next day, while Ye-young was relaxing at home, her older sister, seeing her idleness, called out, "Why don't you find something to do?" Only problem was, today was Sunday. Ye-young retorted that if she did work, she'd probably be panting and out of breath like her brother-in-law. A person's energy is limited, you know? Taking advantage of the day off, Ye-young then suggested they all go out for hot pot. Suddenly, Do-won had something come up at the hospital and couldn't join them. He told everyone to go ahead and eat without him, and for Ye-young to eat his portion too. She'd finally managed to get everyone together, and now he was busy. Frustrated, Ye-young canceled the whole hot pot plan, telling her sister and brother-in-law to just figure out dinner themselves, as she was no longer in the mood. A little while later, she was in Do-won's car. He asked, puzzled, "You have an appointment at the hospital on a Sunday, and you're all dressed up?" She didn't answer, instead launching into a list of her favorite foods, as if hinting at having dinner with him tonight. Turning to him, she asked, "Am I talking too much? Am I distracting you?" Do-won replied that it was fine because he wasn't listening, leaving Ye-young slightly deflated. Curious as to why he was at the hospital on a Sunday, Ye-young pressed him. Do-won confessed that he and Dr. T-Rim were working on a project, and if their research was successful, he would get credit as the author, even though she was kind of annoying. Ye-young commented that he was too easygoing. Ironically, it turned out Do-won's nickname was actually Easygoing Do-won, frustrating Ye-young a second time. Just as she was about to voice her thoughts about him, he cut her off, asking, "You think I'm handsome, don't you?" Ye-young fell right into his trap, admitting that he was indeed handsome. But wanting a compliment in return, she quipped, "I thought this was a romance, but it's turning into a language that deserves a beating." Do-won replied, "I haven't met anyone as funny as you in this world." They were laughing and joking when a car suddenly blocked their path, forcing Do-won to slam on the brakes. Despite just teasing her about being a comedian, he instinctively put his arm out to protect her, making Ye-young's heart skip a beat. It would be a waste not to fall for this handsome senior. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Ye-il was having coffee with two senior colleagues. He wondered aloud, "It's Sunday, there's nothing scheduled. Why did Do-won come in so early? Should we offer him a cup of coffee?" Just then, Yoon-mai mentioned that Do-won had already had coffee, specifically 30 minutes ago. Curious, Ye-il asked, "How do you know?" Yoon-mai explained that almost everyone knew where Do-won was and what he was doing at any given time. From his on-call shifts to his meticulously planned meals, Ye-il couldn't help but admire Do-won's ideal schedule. But his two senior colleagues didn't seem to share his sentiment. Ye-young, observing from nearby, also knew the reason why Do-won rarely had a day off. Later, after breakfast, Ye-young ran into her colleague, Nam Kyung, at the elevators. Instead of her usual scrubs, Nam Kyung was wearing an eye-catching white dress. As the elevator doors closed, a professor quickly stopped them and stepped inside. He turned to Nam Kyung and asked, "You're going to the 5th floor, right?" He then gave her a flirtatious look, which Nam Kyung found rather appealing. Stepping out of the elevator, she asked Ye-young, "Is that the beginning of an office romance?" He looked back and smiled at me again when he left. "I really don't want an office romance." Ye-young and Sabai listened with an air of, "Like we care, you're delusional." Turns out, she was indeed delusional, as the professor already had a girlfriend. His girlfriend scolded him, "Why don't you fix that habit of yours? You keep leading the junior residents on, making them think you're interested in them." At that moment, Ye-il arrived with a group of interns. They were all there early to study. Ye-young asked, "What are you studying?" Everyone turned to look at her. Well, it was pretty obvious who they were studying. Notes filled with complaints about Professor Jo Jun-mo were being read aloud to the entire group of first-year residents. Ye-young didn't argue much, immediately apologizing. However, she questioned, "When we're struggling, are we not allowed to show it?" She meant that their frustrations naturally came out. They weren't intentionally trying to badmouth any professor. Da-hai was dumbfounded, surprised that they were so clueless. Ye-il turned to Ye-young and said, This girl is so old-fashioned and difficult. She'll probably never get married. Do-won and Yoon-mai arrived with food, interrupting Da-hai as she was lecturing the first-year residents. He asked if she was disciplining them again. Da-hai started to explain, but Yi-young nodded vigorously, implying they were indeed undergoing some unofficial hazing. That explained why the first years had arrived so early. Do-won mentioned that this practice had been discontinued to avoid pressuring new residents. He also had an announcement about the hospital's Wall of Fame. Dr. Yi-il had been honored. Do-won was surprised. It was the first time a first-year obstetrics and gynecology resident had received such recognition. Even Sabai, the bookworm who topped their university class, couldn't compare. After the meeting, Yi-il proudly shared his secret to achieving Wall of Fame status, but few listened. Only Sabai, obsessed with achievements, stayed behind. However, her enthusiasm waned upon hearing it involved catering to patients like royalty. She'd clearly hoped for a different kind of secret. Meanwhile, Yi-young was managing the case of a patient, Yi-gum, with uterine cancer. The situation was dire as Yi-gum had tumors in both ovaries. It was unclear whether it was metastatic cancer or just cysts, leaving Yi-gum's mother extremely worried. Yi-gum, however, remained surprisingly calm and optimistic. The department head ordered a CT and MRI scan for Yi-gum, promising to schedule surgery as soon as possible. After bringing Yi-gum's reports to Do-won, he reminded Yi-young to explain everything clearly and check on the patient regularly. This would alleviate the family's stress and reassure Yi-gum about the surgery. Yi-young explained that the patient herself was coping well. The real challenge was her mother, who was constantly crying and consumed by fear for her daughter. She had already spent 30 minutes weeping in the examination room. Elsewhere, Nam Kyung faced a patient requesting a new cancer treatment, a topic she knew nothing about. Unsure how to comfort the patient, Yi-il appeared, cheerful and energetic. He simply told the patient to eat well and exercise, assuring her she looked better than 3 weeks prior. Nam Kyung was amazed by the effectiveness of his almost sycophantic reassurance. No wonder he was on the Wall of Fame. After soothing the patient, Yi-il criticized Nam Kyung for appearing clueless in front of patients, saying it only fueled their anxiety. He advised her to simply smile confidently and recommend eating well and exercising. Nam Kyung was skeptical until another patient greeted Yi-il, and he employed the same eat and exercise formula with equally surprising success. Following Do-won's advice, Yi-young informed Yi-gum about the surgery schedule. However, lacking tact, she bluntly delivered the news. Yi-gum's mother worried that delaying the surgery due to her daughter's dietary restrictions would be detrimental. She asked if the schedule could be moved to early morning. Yi-young simply stated that the operating rooms were fully booked and the earliest available slot was the following morning, adding that further delay could endanger Yi-gum. While unable to offer guarantees, Yi-young still felt uncomfortable with the level of the mother's distress. Nam Kyung then encountered a difficult elderly patient who insisted on being discharged early to attend a wedding. However, she had an unspecified urinary condition requiring complete drainage before discharge. Annoyed by the patient's constant complaints, Nam Kyung employed Yi-il's technique but with a more forceful tone, telling the woman she needed to eat and exercise to regain strength for the wedding. The patient, seemingly intimidated, quickly agreed without further protest. Apparently, a sterner approach was sometimes necessary. That evening, as the group prepared to leave, Do-won asked if anyone wanted to grab dinner. He'd asked at the exact moment everyone was craving rest, so only Yi-young stayed behind. She had envisioned a fancy dinner date, but instead, she watched Do-won quickly eat before his shift. She had hoped to dine out with him, but he was oblivious. Do-won apologized and suggested they go another time, explaining he needed to review surgical videos. After the meal, the two doctors met with Yi-gum's mother to discuss her condition and the necessary surgical procedures. The prognosis wasn't optimistic. Yi-gum would require the removal of cancerous tissue, followed by chemotherapy and radiation. Yi-gum's mother wept, heartbroken that her young daughter faced such hardship. To comfort her, Yi-gum entered the room and reassured her mother, though there wasn't much else she could do. Meanwhile, Sabai attended to a patient, Jong-ju, experiencing an unexpected pregnancy and nearing labor. The patient's father fretted, wondering who the irresponsible scoundrel was who impregnated his daughter and why he wasn't present. He was both angry and anxious about the impending birth, especially given the couple weren't married. Suddenly, the boyfriend, Young Chan, arrived. Jongju's father barked, "Why are you only here now?" But Young Chan ignored him and rushed to his girlfriend's side. During the ultrasound, the situation became more tense as Young Chan left abruptly due to personal matters, leaving Jongju's father increasingly worried. Fortunately, the baby appeared healthy. Witnessing this awkward family dynamic, Sabai sought advice from Yi-il, who, despite his seemingly naive demeanor, possessed surprising insight. Yi-il explained that with a boyfriend prone to disappearing and a domineering father-in-law, the husband-to-be likely felt pressured and caught between his family and his partner. This conflict, Yi-il believed, would be resolved by the baby's arrival. He recounted a previous experience where the team delivered a baby, and everyone present was moved to tears, imagining the newborn as their own child or grandchild. The sound of a baby's cry, he claimed, could melt even the hardest heart. Nam Kyung questioned why Young Chan had left so quickly after visiting. Yi-il speculated that he wasn't emotionally prepared and would likely return after processing his feelings. Sabai retorted, "What if he doesn't come back? Isn't your solution useless then? I want my coffee back, the one I gave you for this worthless advice." Just then, Yi-young rushed back, only to be confronted by a professor. Luckily, her team covered for her, sparing her a reprimand. However, she still had to change into scrubs and endure the professor's scolding for her repeated tardiness to surgeries, with him questioning if she was repeating past mistakes. Fortunately, Yi-gum's mother, meeting assistants, intervened and asked Yi-young to check on her daughter, effectively rescuing her from the professor's wrath. The mother remarked, "Yi-young, you really remind me of my daughter. Not everyone starts out proficient at everything." Yi-young confessed that she wasn't new to such situations. Ignoring this, Yi-gum's mother began sharing her daughter's story. "She tried so hard, just like you. I sent her abroad to study alone, unaware of the hardships she endured. Meanwhile, I bragged about her studying overseas. When I discovered the truth, I couldn't stop crying. Every time I saw her, my heart ached. Despite everything, I'll support her and never let her suffer alone again. I'll be a proper mother to her now." The next day, as Jongju went into labor, Sabai arrived alongside her father. Jongju asked her father to call Young Chan, but the number was out of service. After a successful delivery, Sabai announced the good news: both mother and the healthy, perfectly formed baby were doing well. Before she could finish, the much-disliked son-in-law appeared. The father demanded to know why Young Chan hadn't answered his calls. It turned out he'd tried unsuccessfully to bring his mother to visit, the red mark on his face suggesting a maternal slap. Young Chan promised to discuss marrying Jongju with his parents. "I promise, Dad, I won't abandon her." Meanwhile, Nam Kyung, dressed up for a blind date, was intercepted by Nurse Ju-yeon and asked to insert a catheter for the elderly patient from the previous day. Despite being in a hurry, duty called. Upon entering the patient's room, Nam Kyung carefully explained the catheter procedure. Her stylish attire for the date seemed to put the elderly woman in a good mood, making her more receptive. After completing the task, Nam Kyung, ever mindful of Yi-il's advice, added, "Remember to eat well and exercise regularly." On Yi-young's side, she received a call from Professor Rowe, inquiring about the operating room preparations for Miss Gum. Everything was ready, and Miss Gum could go into surgery immediately. Beforehand, she comforted her mother, assuring her that everything would be all right and that the doctors were highly skilled. Yi-gum's mother also expressed confidence in her daughter's well-being. In truth, Yi-gum knew how worried her mother truly was. After Yi-young escorted Yi-gum to the operating room, Yi-gum finally broke down and cried, overcome with fear. She had put on a brave face for her mother, but the prospect of surgery terrified her. To help calm Yi-gum, Yi-young asked the anesthesiology team for a favor. She wanted to delay the surgery by 10 minutes, knowing this would likely irritate Professor Joe. The anesthesia team advised against it, but Yi-young insisted, saying she would call the professor herself so no one else would get reprimanded. When she called Professor Joe, Yi-young claimed a test was missing, and the anesthesia team was urgently running it, requesting he wait a bit longer. However, the professor was all too familiar with Yi-young's history of delaying surgeries. Yi-young preferred being scolded to having Gum undergo surgery in a state of fear. After regaining her composure, Yi Gum was ready. Before the surgery began, she thanked Yi Young for buying her some time. Despite the patient having multiple tumors to be removed, Professor Zhou completed the surgery in just an hour, thinking to himself that he wished Yi Young could prepare the operating room as quickly as she operated. Although he often scolded her, it was out of concern for her. After the surgery, Yi Young informed Gum's mother of the successful outcome. Relieved that her daughter was out of danger, she burst into tears. Meanwhile, Yong Chan promised his father-in-law that he would take care of his daughter for the rest of his life. However, after he left, the father-in-law seemed uneasy and turned to Sabai, saying, "I should be happy, right? Happy to suddenly become a grandfather. But when I see that baby, it feels like an angel sent down to torment my daughter." He then left, discarding a bag of items in the trash. After he left, Sabai visited Zhongju, gifting her a maternity pillow and socks to keep her warm at night. He also returned the bag her father had discarded. The items were gifts from Zhongju's father, accompanied by a note. "I asked around the maternity ward for these. I thought they might be useful for you." At least there was a small gesture of reconciliation between the families. That night, after Nam Kyung returned from a blind date, she heard a strange noise coming from OK Kim's room. She was surprised to discover that OK Kim had taken her advice to eat well and exercise quite literally, spending the entire day exercising. The next day, Nam Kyung arrived promptly to help OK Kim with her catheter. OK Kim told her that she didn't mind not being discharged soon and that Nam Kyung could take her time. She recounted how she had walked 12 laps around the hospital the previous day and how eating too much had given her a bitter taste in her mouth. OK Kim also revealed that she had cancelled her wedding. "I should have done that from the start so you wouldn't have to work so hard. When I was young and beautiful like you, I had other opportunities. At my age, every opportunity is the last one." This was why she chose to cancel the wedding and focus on her treatment. "From now on, I will eat well and exercise even more diligently." Nam Kyung then advised her that she only needed to walk for 30 minutes each day and eat moderately. She felt incredibly remorseful for having been careless with her patient, who seemed to genuinely like her. Suddenly, OK Kim's daughter-in-law and grandchild arrived. It turned out that the wedding she cancelled was her own. Nam Kyung was somewhat surprised by OK Kim's youthful spirit. To thank Nam Kyung, OK Kim gave her some cupcakes. Nam Kyung shared the cupcakes with her colleagues while they looked at the weekly honor roll. Oh Yi Young's name was at the top. She was recognized for helping a cancer patient overcome her fear, successfully completing the surgery, and receiving heartfelt thanks from the patient's family. Her disappointed younger colleague lamented that he had styled his hair for days in anticipation of his own name being on the board. Today was the Obstetrics and Gynecology Department's annual photo day. Everyone gathered on the hospital grounds for the picture. Professor Seo Young-min was checking if the urology department had enough people when Do-won arrived. The Obgyn team wasn't known for their smiles, so Do-won suggested, "Instead of smiling, let's all say ooh-ooh." As everyone ooh-oohed in an attempt to smile, Yi Young seized the opportunity to stand next to her crush, holding Do-won's hand as a subtle expression of her feelings. The next day, in the first-year residence room, Yi Il showed everyone the photos from the previous day, but Yi Young was preoccupied. Her sister had called her for a meeting, and she'd forgotten to log out of her messaging app on the computer. When she messaged her sister about resigning, her fellow first-year residents saw the message and started discussing it. "She's probably just threatening to quit, right? It's normal here. We all have our resignation letters ready." Sabai offered to help Yi Young review medical records and study together, and Yi Il chimed in, "Help me too." Although he hadn't been fired yet, he was already preparing for the possibility. When Yi Young met her sister, she commented on the excessive amount of cake on the table. Her sister replied, "It's Do-won's." Yi Young immediately picked up a fork and took a few bites. "I like this cake too, Annie." Yi Young's sister was there to check if she was working hard, as she still owed over 40 million won. She also mentioned that she would try to get pregnant again. Before turning 40, she still wanted to have a healthy child. Suddenly, her husband called and asked about Do-won's situation. Do-dong complained that Do-won wasn't going on blind dates. The mention of blind dates made Yi Young perk up. She couldn't let any other woman snag her prize. After the call, Du Dong asked Yi Young if Du Won liked anyone at the hospital. Yi Young stammered, "I don't know. Please don't ask me." Meanwhile, Yi Il approached Du Won with a request. He said, "We have the same taste, Du Won." But unfortunately for him, Du Won liked women, not men. Yi Il's demeanor often led to misunderstandings. He was actually asking Du Won about becoming the captain of the tennis team. Du Won's only free time was Friday evenings for Netflix, so he excused himself by claiming to be busy. During a meeting with Professor Seo Young-min, a research topic on predicting premature birth by measuring uterine elasticity was introduced. If successful, the project would be presented at a research conference in Italy later that year. Everyone eagerly volunteered, except for Yi Young, who was playing with cookies in the corner. Noticing this, Professor Young-min assigned the project to her. Although Yi Young declined, claiming she wasn't capable, the professor had faith in her abilities and insisted. This sparked jealousy in Sabai, who grumbled on the way out. Why would the professor give the opportunity to someone who wants to quit? What a waste. Realizing that his message had been seen, Yi Il tried to explain, "We didn't mean to pry. We're friends, so please understand." Yi Young thought it was just an excuse. Was Sabai upset about the research project? Yi Il thought, probably both. Despite their words, the 3 first-year residents created a private group chat. Yi Il wrote, "I told you guys not to say anything. People don't always mean it when they say they'll quit." Sabai typed, "If Yi Young wants to quit, let her. I want to do Professor Young-min's research." But she thought better of it and deleted the message. Later, missing Du Won, Yi Young made an excuse to bother him while he was sleeping. "I don't want to call you at this hour, Professor, but it's kind of urgent." She continued, "Someone is starving because they haven't eaten, and now they can't eat because everything is closed." Du Won asked who it was, and Yi Young replied with a confident smile, "Me." Du Won promptly shut the door, leaving her outside with a carton of milk and a piece of cake. The next day, at the dorm, Sabai arrived to find Yi Young already there. Although they sat at the same table, a palpable distance hung between them. Yi Young was about to ask Sabai about the professor's project when Professor Young-min called, instructing her to come to his office as someone from cardiothoracic surgery was there and needed a consultation. Sabai was envious that a first-year resident like Yi Young had the opportunity to interact with a cardiothoracic surgeon. She couldn't believe Yi Young had access to such high-ranking individuals. Ignoring Sabai's probing questions about the surgeon, Yi Young asked if she knew anything about Epstein's anomaly FT being likely shorthand for Fallot's tetralogy, which is often associated with Epstein's. This was the very topic she was about to face with the surgeon. In Professor Young-min's office, Yi Young was bombarded with difficult questions from the cardiothoracic surgeon, questions she couldn't answer. They were all related to complex cardiac conditions, leaving Du Won to step in and answer for her. Yi Young could only offer apologies. Professor Young-min arrived and, addressing Professor Seo Jun, quipped, "Grilling my resident in my hospital again?" More importantly, the two professors needed to discuss a case of Epstein's anomaly detected in a 19-week ultrasound. A baby with this condition would likely require a C-section rather than a vaginal delivery. Professor Young-min explained that this current case also presented with the anomaly, but it was less severe than the previous one. However, as the fetus was only 20 weeks old, further monitoring was necessary. Professor Seo Jun, upon hearing this, declared the matter concluded and clapped. To everyone's surprise, Yi Young also clapped, breaking the silence of the room. She was immediately reprimanded by the cardiothoracic surgeon. "Are you falling asleep while we're discussing a patient's life?" Typical of this slacker generation, sleeping on the job. Seo Jun remarked that she reminded him of a friend. Just then, Dr. Du-ha called. "Hello, Dr. Du-ha. This is the 3rd time you've called today." Their constant communication, reminiscent of a married couple, carried over from other projects. Du-ha, no less mischievous than Yi Young, had applied ice to a feverish patient with a cold, earning him a scolding from Da-hai when she discovered it. Nam Kyung, eavesdropping from outside, quickly retreated when Nurse Ju-yeon needed help with medication. Back at the dorm, Sabai was being reprimanded by Yumai for formatting her report incorrectly. While on the phone, Sabai overheard Diang's report, which was well analyzed. Still envious of Yi Young, Sabai peeked at her computer and, in a bold move, deleted Yi Young's research. As a result, she faced Professor Young-min's wrath for not preparing the report as instructed. Sabai, observing the scene, smirked, assuming the professor would now assign the project to her. Yi Young, frustrated, ran to her friends, insisting she had completed the report. "You saw it too, right, Sabai?" She was incredibly upset about the prospect of preparing study materials for the next 3 months. To make matters worse, the professor wanted her involved in all his surgeries. It felt like torture, piling more work onto someone already considering quitting. According to the report, Yi Young's patient, Bo-han, had a scheduled amniocentesis, but it was too late. The amniotic sac had ruptured, and the fluid was almost gone. Based on the lab results, Do-won concluded that the ruptured sac was likely infected, putting the baby in grave danger. In the worst-case scenario, the professor would have to prepare the family for the possibility of loss. After being informed of the situation, the patient was devastated. She had longed for another child after the death of her first. She pleaded with the professor to let her keep the baby for just 1 more week. She had only just begun to feel its presence. Reluctantly, they called the husband aside to explain the necessity of an emergency C-section. To save the baby, they needed to induce labor immediately. Professor Young-min asked if the husband wanted to test for cardiac defects in the baby. He agreed, unwilling to let his wife suffer the pain of losing another child. After receiving the information, Professor Young-min went to his desk to jot down a note for Yi Young. Sabai, witnessing this preferential treatment towards someone about to resign, grew even more resentful. She impulsively grabbed the note and threw it on the floor. Coincidentally, someone saw this and picked up the discarded note. When Sabai returned, the note was gone. Panicked, she rushed back to the dorm, desperately trying to recall its contents so she could rewrite it for Yi Young. Nam Kyung entered, noticing a cup of noodles on the table. Assuming Sabai was simply hungry, she didn't give it much thought. Just as she sat down, Nurse Ju-yeon called her back to work. A chemotherapy patient named Min Ok was experiencing severe nausea. Before Nam Kyung could even prescribe medication as instructed, the patient vomited on her. Still needing anti-nausea medication for the patient, she quickly ran out to write the prescription. Thankfully, she kept a spare set of scrubs for such occasions. She shuddered to think of wearing vomit-soaked clothes all day. After changing, Nurse Ju-yeon kindly helped Nam Kyung finish her remaining tasks. When Professor Roh came to check on the patient, Nam Kyung was spared further embarrassment, unlike Yi Young. Exhausted and constantly berated, Yi Young trudged back to the dorm. Sabai, never missing a chance to needle her, remarked, "You got chewed out by Professor Young-min, didn't you? I heard he even mentioned you might resign." Yi Young ignored her, picking up a piece of bread to eat. Sabai urged her to work on the research materials, but Yi Young replied that she'd already done so. Sabai was startled, unsure what was happening. It turned out Yi Young had seen Sabai tear up the note at the desk and had retrieved it herself. Not wanting to cause further conflict, she simply said someone had found and returned it. "Don't worry about it." Sabai was immediately overcome with guilt and shame. Yi Young calmly took a bottle of water, sat across from her, and explained, "I'll tell you why I got scolded. It's because I couldn't perform the amniocentesis on Bo-han. Her water had already broken. They asked me to do a different test, but I couldn't. That's why I was reprimanded." Sabai, curious, asked why she refused. "The professor trusted you enough to give you the opportunity. You should have done it. I'm not saying it's pleasant, but it could help the patient in future pregnancies and contribute to research. It's a good learning experience." Yi Young pointed out that Sabai sounded just like Professor Young-min. "I'm going back to work now." Then, with a change of heart, she added, "Actually, let's do this together." Despite her initial apprehension, Yi Young didn't want any discord within the resident group. She asked Sabai to help with the research. During the surgery, Professor Young-min successfully delivered the baby and handed it to Yi Young. Holding the tiny life in her hands for the first time, Yi Young remembered the professor's instructions to collect a tissue sample. Never having done this before, she nervously confessed to Sabai, "What if I do something wrong?" Sabai reassured her that as a 20-week preemie, the baby's chances of survival were slim, its organs not fully developed. She said this to encourage Yi Young to be strong and face the difficult task. Together, They began the delicate procedure of collecting the tissue sample. Observing this, Professor Young-min felt a sense of relief. The cardiothoracic surgeon remarked to Yi Young, "It's reassuring to have a teammate in these situations, isn't it?" After all the procedures and tests were finished, the professor went to inform Bo-han about the next steps regarding her future pregnancy. He explained what precautions she needed to take to avoid a similar situation with her next child. Of course, after everything, a good cry was in order. The professor encouraged Bo-han to let it all out, assuring her that one day she would hear the healthy cry of her own baby. Grateful to Nurse Ju-yeon for saving her from the professor's reprimand, Nam Kyung treated her to a coffee as a thank you. As she left, she reminded Yi-il, "Don't mention anything about Nurse Ju-yeon to anyone, okay?" Unfortunately, her friend was completely engrossed in his game and barely registered her words. Suddenly, Yi-il felt a pang of hunger. He suggested to Nam Kyung that they grab a bite to eat, or maybe head back to the dorm and invite the other two. Meanwhile, back at the dorm, Sabai and Yi Young seemed to have patched things up after performing surgery together. Although both were aware of what the other had done, they chose not to expose each other. Instead, they worked together to clear up the misunderstanding. Work was already stressful enough, so Yi Young opted for the solution that preserved their friendship. When Nam Kyung and Yi-il arrived, the group decided to go out for marinated grilled beef, a reward for their hard work. At the obstetrics and gynecology department's dinner party, everyone was joyfully chatting and enjoying the meal, except for Nam Kyung. She spent the entire evening arguing with her boyfriend on the phone, but he wasn't listening. At another table, Do-won gossiped with Da-hai. "I think she just got dumped." Meanwhile, Yi-young somehow managed to get so drunk that she fell asleep in the restroom. When she woke up, she remembered she hadn't finished her dried pollock, so she returned to the banquet hall. Two senior doctors approached her and asked for her name. Yi-young thought they were flirting with her, but it turned out she was sitting at the wrong table. Her team had already left. Do-won, on the stairs, quickly called out to Yi-young and signaled for her to leave, as the situation was getting embarrassing. The next morning, on their way to work, Yi-young's sister, Ju-young, asked, "Do you remember what you did at the party last night?" Yi-young thought for a moment and replied, "Nothing really." Ju-young told her to think harder, and Yi-young realized she actually had done something she shouldn't have. When the professor asked what nicknames the residents had for the attending physicians, Yi-il tried to stop her. But Yi-young blurted out that Professor Young-min was nosy and Dr. Gi-sun was screaming demon. Yi-young and Yi-il then quickly tried to change the subject, suggesting, "How about we order some more dried pollock?" Remembering the scene from last night, Yi-young couldn't believe she had gone so far. She turned to her sister and asked, "Since I'm already late, maybe I shouldn't go at all?" Avoiding the inevitable proved impossible. Upon arriving at the hospital, Professors Young-min and Gi-sun appeared in the same elevator with Yi-young. Gi-sun asked, "It seemed like Yi-young had a lot to drink last night, didn't she?" Clearly referencing the nickname reveal. Professor Seo chimed in, "It's no big deal. It's all in good fun." Fun, indeed. As soon as they parted ways, she assigned Yi-young to manage 20,000 patients in a day. "No problem," she thought sarcastically. Meanwhile, Yi-il was performing an ultrasound on a patient when he discovered something that looked suspiciously like a cancerous tumor. To be sure, he called Professor John. However, after the professor performed the ultrasound, she discovered it was just a fecal impaction. She glared at Yi-il and then reassured the patient, prescribing pregnancy-safe medication to help with bowel movements. Outside, Professor John scolded Yi-il for calling her over to look at a piece of poop, especially since she was so busy. Yi-il explained that he didn't want to miss any signs of harm to the patient, as it looked like a malignant ovarian tumor from his textbook. Do-won intervened, taking responsibility for Yi-il's actions and asking the professor to forgive him for not supervising him better. Elsewhere, Sabai was tasked by Professor Seo to ask Professor Yi if he was available for a hysterectomy during a C-section. Sabai excitedly approached Professor Yi, who looked quite serious as he reviewed the case. When he questioned the patient's stats, Sabai recited them flawlessly, as if she had memorized them beforehand. Impressed, Professor Yi asked for her name, and Sabai proudly introduced herself. However, there was one thing that bothered Professor Yi. The patient had 50 fibroids, meaning the surgery would take a considerable amount of time. Nevertheless, he still wanted Sabai to participate in the operation. The lengthy surgery time made Sabai suddenly feel apprehensive about the task. While feeling down, Yi-young called. Hearing that food was ready, her mood instantly brightened. Yi-ll brought the food back for the team and noticed Nam Kyung staring at her phone without eating. Unable to resist teasing her, he asked, "Can't reach your boyfriend?" Sabai and Yi-young joined in, one suggesting a temporary breakup and the other a permanent one. However, Yi-young's meal was short-lived. She was called away to deal with a new intern, Tak Gi-yeon, who was notorious for making mistakes. He constantly prescribed the wrong things for patients. Now, Yi-young was tasked with guiding him. During a patient examination and injection, the intern kept chattering nervously, saying things like, "I've already given so many shots, it must hurt a lot." Every time Yi-young tried to do something, the intern would interrupt with unnecessary comments to the patient, finally causing Yi-young to snap. "Shut up and get out!" The patient was shocked, and the intern was mortified. Do-won pulled Yi-young aside to reprimand her. No matter how frustrated she was, she shouldn't have yelled at him to get out in front of a patient. The incident with Dr. Tak spread like wildfire, with rumors that no patient would ever let him assist them again. Yi-young, exasperated, explained, "I was just so frustrated that I snapped at him." Do-won advised her to at least wait until after treating the patient to pull the intern aside for a private reprimand. He wasn't forbidding her from correcting him, just not in front of the patients. Despite his earlier reprimand, Do-won noticed Yi-young's dejection as they were leaving and tried to appease her. "Don't be mad at me for earlier," he said gently. "You must be tired." Yi-young assured him she was fine and he didn't need to apologize. She had already apologized to the intern. Glancing at the clock, Yi-young realized it was past midnight and a new day had begun. She seemed surprised, and Do-won assumed it was something serious. It turned out the new day was Yi-young's birthday. Do-won, remembering the connection between their families, said, "Our families are practically in-laws, so pick any gift you want. I'll get it for you." Yi-young, without hesitation, requested that Do-won agree to any request she made until the elevator reached the 14th floor. Of course, Do-won couldn't refuse. Inside the elevator, Yi-young's first request was to be treated to a meal implying a private dinner date. Do-won, however, played coy, suggesting they forage for food. Her second request was for a private movie night, like a date. Do-won deflected again, saying, "I usually have beer and watch Netflix on Friday nights. You can join me in the living room." Despite Do-won's subtle rejections, Yi-young persisted. Before the elevator reached the 14th floor, she asked, "Could I possibly like you?" They held each other's gaze until the doors opened on the 14th floor. Do-won replied, "If you want us to be awkwardly staring at each other, maybe?" The next day, as Do-won was preparing to leave for work early, his brother stopped him, insisting they celebrate Yi-young's birthday. Since Do-won's brother was married to Yi-young's sister, a joint celebration made sense. Ju-young took the opportunity to snap a photo to send to their father, who was working with a friend at the same hospital, reminding him to work hard. Yi-young and Do-won already had a child to take care of, after all. Do-won ate quickly and left for the hospital, leaving Yi-young slightly disappointed. However, she didn't forget about her present. His brother and sister had transferred her some money as a gift, since they didn't know what she wanted. When Yi-young arrived at the residence room at the hospital, her colleagues wished her a happy birthday, having seen the notification on Zalo rather than remembering it themselves. Surprisingly, they also had a gift for her, and each of them had given her the exact same sunscreen. Yi-young mused that perhaps only on occasions like this did her team share the same brain. Continuing with their daily work, Yi-ll examined another patient. The patient was hoping for a girl. Based on his ultrasound observation, Yi-ll saw that the baby was a boy and said, "Boys are good too." However, the patient already had 3 sons and was trying for a daughter. The ultrasound confirmation of another boy left her disappointed. To comfort her patient, Yi-ll promised to call in another doctor just to be sure. However, the ultrasound still revealed a baby boy in the obgyn department. After the examination, Yoon-mi congratulated Yi-ll on his correct guess and expressed her hope that she wouldn't see him again that day due to her busy schedule. Yi Young was currently managing a cancer patient who was worried about the possibility of never waking up after anesthesia for surgery. Yi Young explained that the hospital couldn't guarantee anything with 100% certainty, but that patients were generally woken up after surgery. She reassured the patient not to worry too much. The patient, Si Jin, instructed Yi Young to call her Na Si Jin if she didn't wake up after her cancer surgery. If that didn't work, she should try Ko Min Jun, believing the worry might help her regain consciousness. Amidst her anxieties, Si Jin's son kept pestering her to turn on the Wi-Fi so he could play games. Another cancer patient, Jong Im, was in the next bed. Her current indicators showed she wasn't ready for chemotherapy and needed to receive immune-boosting injections first. With a history of 4 surgeries in the past 10 years, the doctors were concerned about the cumulative effects of radiation and chemotherapy on her body. It would likely take some time for her to recover before the next round of chemotherapy. Hearing this, Si Jin offered words of encouragement, saying she often had good intuition about these things. Suddenly, Jong Im asked Yi Young if Dr. Yoon Mai was around. It turned out that Yoon Mai often took Jong Im's child out to eat, which is why she was asking for her. While they were talking, Nam Kyung rushed in to join the conversation. However, her joy was short-lived as she was constantly receiving breakup texts from her boyfriend. When Yi Young asked about it, Nam Kyung denied it, claiming he was just being clingy. Yi Young then called Nam Kyung, who eagerly grabbed the phone, only to reiterate that her boyfriend was the one initiating the breakup and being clingy. Meanwhile, Sabai was tasked with obtaining surgical consent from Mrs. Okun for a hysterectomy. However, the patient was embarrassed about the procedure becoming public knowledge. Sabai, unfortunately, spoke so loudly that it seemed the whole ward could hear about Mrs. Okun's uterine cancer. Despite trying to reassure the patient, Sabai's loud voice only exacerbated her embarrassment. Mrs. Okun had wanted to keep her condition private, and Sabai had disregarded her wishes, making her consider refusing the surgery altogether. Reporting back to Professor Yi Hwi about the situation, the doctor confirmed that surgery was necessary. Sabai explained that she had gone over both the procedure and the consent form, but Mrs. Okun seemed reluctant despite experiencing vaginal discharge. It was as if she felt pressured into the surgery and didn't want to sign the consent form. "Should I just discharge her?" Yi Hwi asked, exasperated that a cancer patient would want to leave. He understood that Mrs. Okun was embarrassed about her discharge and the cancer diagnosis. He urged Sabai to try persuading the patient one last time, expressing his confidence in her ability. Sabai retorted, "I'm Sabai, not Sa-jeng." Lost for what to do next, Sabai was suddenly called over by the 2 children from Yi Young's patient room. Si Jin's son was crying out of fear for his mother, and Jong Im's daughter had brought him to inquire about his mother's surgery schedule. Meanwhile, Mrs. Zin's surgery was successful. Following instructions, Yi Young woke Mrs. Zin, who was startled and disoriented, believing she was in the afterlife. Thankfully, Yi Young quickly reassured her that she was in the present, not heaven or hell. Relieved, Mrs. Zin calmed down and went back to sleep, demonstrating the common fear of not waking up from anesthesia. Fresh out of the operating room, Yi Il rushed over to Yi Young with a report, asking for her assistance. Initially, Yi Il was hesitant, but upon hearing Dogon's name, he snatched the report and headed straight to room 54, Dogon's private room. Anything for the senior he admired, he was quick to act. However, when Yi Young arrived to deliver Dogon's belongings, he remained unconscious, despite her attempts to rouse him by dropping things or creating minor disruptions. Dogon only turned over after a disappointed Yi Young left. It seemed Do-won didn't want their feelings to interfere with their work. Back to the daily grind, Yi Il was performing a hysteroscopy on a pregnant patient. The patient continually complained of pain, but Yi Il found everything to be normal. To be certain, he asked his senior, Da Hai, to double-check. After her examination, the results were identical to Yi Il's findings, much to his relief. However, Da Hai was exhausted and just wanted a 3-minute nap. But before she could drift off, she remembered some pending tests and rushed off again. The next day, in the cancer ward overseen by Professor Du, Si Jin appeared to have recovered well from her surgery. She expressed her gratitude and offered encouragement to the patient across from her. The professor assured Jong Im that she would soon begin chemotherapy, that everything was proceeding smoothly, and that she needn't worry. Meanwhile, Sabai continued to follow Professor Yi Hy's instructions and tried to persuade Mrs. Okun to have surgery. She explained that if Mrs. Okun didn't have the surgery that day, it would be cancelled, and she could be discharged. Mrs. Okun was apprehensive about the surgery. Her son worked hard to make ends meet, and she knew other elderly women with the same condition who were living just fine. She mentioned living a virtuous life, but couldn't see how that related to the surgery. At this point, Professor Yi Hwi stepped in, advising Mrs. Okun not to listen to such advice from friends. He said, "Do you know why you have uterine cancer? You've spent your whole life toiling for your children. For 40 years, you've worked tirelessly, only to come home and scrub dishes. That's why you're sick. Have the surgery, and then go home and tell everyone that a life of hard work is something to be proud of, not ashamed of, even if it led to cancer. You worked hard for your children, that's all." Finally, after Mrs. Okun agreed, Professor Yi Hwi and Sabai performed her surgery. Sabai realized that such heartfelt advice was as much a part of the healing process as the medical procedure itself. The professor, curious, asked, "So, you think I did a good job?" He was about to invite Sabai to assist him in future surgeries when she walked away, leaving him unable to finish his invitation. Meanwhile, Do-won was receiving complaints about Yi-il. Just then, Yi-il brought him some water and proudly recounted his recent accurate diagnosis. "That's the best news you've had all day," Do-won said, then asked, "Want to hear the bad news?" He reminded Yi-il that Professor John, Yoon-mai, and Da-hai all had extremely busy schedules. Due to Yi-il's lack of confidence, he was burdening them and adding to their workload. Do-won scolded him, "You're acting incompetent." He advised Yi-il to think carefully about what the right course of action is in the future. Yi-il took these words to heart, returning to the residence room with a sullen expression. The tension only eased slightly when Nam Kyung brought in snacks for everyone. Just when it seemed like a peaceful evening was settling in, the code blue alarm blared. The team rushed to the scene. Yi-young noticed the two children from her patient rooms were also there. Something was clearly wrong. It turned out Jong-im's mother had suffered a pulmonary embolism after surgery. Despite Professor Do's successful surgery earlier, there was nothing more that could be done for Jong-im. He requested that her family be called in. Though still young, the woman's daughter was a strong girl, not believing her mother would face any obstacles. Ever since she was born, her mother had been in and out of hospitals so many times that the girl was used to it. Professor Do, unable to be direct, asked Yi-young to speak with the girl and offer her some food. He thought she would be okay. Sitting with the patient's daughter, Yi-young gently advised the little girl to look at her mother one last time, as she would soon be going to heaven. At that moment, the reality of the situation hit the girl. Despite acting strong and mature all these years, she was still just a child, unprepared to face the truth of losing her mother. Yi-young said, "Keep looking at your mother's face for the next 3 days. Someone will be here soon to help you. Remember to eat well, study hard, be brave, and be good." Yi-young explained that these were the same words she was told when her own mother passed away when she was a child. She also gave the girl her phone number, telling her to call if she needed anything. Just then, a man from the pub arrived. He was a member of the organization supporting the girl's mother. He explained that the center would continue to care for her. He then sat down, offering comfort and solace to the grieving child. The little girl cried in the arms of a stranger. This scene affected Yi-young so deeply that the next morning, she woke up sobbing. She hadn't expected the memories of her mother's passing to be so painful after all this time. In the residence room, the doctors were discussing their on-call schedule for the month. Yi-young asked Sabai to switch shifts with her on Friday. Sabai, suspecting Yi-young wanted to work with her attending physician so she could sneak in a nap, or perhaps to watch a movie with Dogon, asked why she wanted the change. Yi-young simply offered a vague explanation. Suddenly, a conflict arose between Sabai and Nam Kyung. Sabai, a stickler for rules, insisted Nam Kyung cover a shift for Dare, who had taken a day off the previous month. Despite Nam Kyung's pleas to postpone it until the following month, Sabai was unrelenting. The two argued back and forth, one explaining her reasons, the other refuting them. Exasperated, Yi-il and Yi-young quietly slipped out of the room. Outside, Yi-young spotted a familiar figure. Thinking it was Do-won, she followed the person to the parking lot, only to discover it wasn't him, just someone with a similar build. Assuming Do-won had agreed to their dinner date, Yi-young was looking for his car when Ju-young called to inform her that Do-won had already made a reservation, much to Yi-young's surprise. He had taken the subway back earlier, leaving his car at the hospital. The next day during their shift, Nam Kyung asked Sabai who had covered for patient Park Dong-do. Sabai insisted it was Nam Kyung, while Nam Kyung insisted it was Sabai. They blamed each other, neither willing to admit they hadn't seen the patient. As a result, Park Dong-do wasn't examined. Professor Roh arrived, demanding to know who had neglected the patient. Despite her annoyance with Sabai, Nam Kyung took the blame, leaving Sabai looking smug and relieved. Yi-young's new patient was a woman who seemed incredibly happy, her husband constantly calling her honey. Even while explaining a potential hemorrhage to the patient, Yi-young had to finish her lunch. Back in the office, her colleagues remarked on the couple's sweetness. Thinking they were talking about the tea they were drinking, Yi-young realized they were discussing Cha Bomi's husband. Witnessing such a loving relationship made them envious. The husband had even given them the tea. Wondering where to find a husband like that, Yi-young replied that they existed. She just didn't know if she'd ever find one herself. Meanwhile, Yi-young's older sister and her husband were at the hospital to consult about their chances of conceiving. Just seeing a pregnant woman pass by made Ju-young incredibly anxious, wishing she could experience motherhood. Trying to comfort his wife, her husband said, "I bet being 3 months pregnant must be really painful." In reality, he just wanted to reassure her and go home, as he wasn't insistent on having children, especially given her age. Despite her husband's attempts to dissuade her, Ju-young was determined to get examined and receive a certificate for in vitro fertilization. At least that would give her some peace of mind about her chances of becoming a mother. She wouldn't stop until she could return to the hospital pregnant. Nam Kyung ran into a former patient whose pleural effusion she had helped drain. This was Nam Kyung's first patient successfully discharged, so she stopped by to check on her. However, she put her foot in her mouth by bad-mouthing Sabai to Miss instead of asking about her health. She described Sabai as an emotionless AI robot who always thought she was right and nitpicked about everything, like a petty person. As fate would have it, Sabai appeared at that very moment to update Miss on her cancer treatment. Nam Kyung was mortified and didn't know where to hide. Back in the residence room, Nam Kyung complained that she didn't like the pig's feet on the menu that day. It turned out Sabai had specifically asked Dare to buy it for the group, knowing Nam Kyung disliked it. Seizing the opportunity, Nam Kyung asked Th1EFNG who was in charge of the on-call schedule. Learning it was Yi-young, she quickly requested the 3rd weekend off. Unfortunately, Sabai chimed in, saying her father's birthday also fell on that weekend. The two started bickering like cats and dogs, arguing over the same day off. Suddenly, Yi-il received a call. He thanked Dr. T-zim for calling, giving him an excuse to escape the battlefield. Coincidentally, Jae-rang also received a call from Do-won, leaving the two squabbling residents alone in the room. After meeting with Tim, Yi-il also thanked T-zim for helping him escape the chaotic room. T-zim noticed Yi-il looked exhausted, which was understandable since he hadn't showered or rested properly in 3 days. T-zim then asked Yi-il if he knew anything about patient Mun Dong-sin. Apparently, she held the record in the obstetrics department for the most ultrasounds, getting one every week because she was worried about her baby. Every ultrasound showed everything was normal, contrary to her worries. That evening, Yi-young and Do-won were driving home. As soon as she got in the car, Yi-young said, "You didn't have to wait for me, you know? I could have taken the subway. You're busy." Do-won replied, "I know." Yi-young, feeling annoyed, retorted, "If you think I'm a bother, then don't talk to me until we get home." Do-won realized his mistake and apologized, albeit a little too late. He was so easygoing at the hospital, but could be difficult outside of work. Just as he was about to appease Yi-young, he received a call from Professor Yoon Myong. She called about Do-won's research paper, explaining that because he was busy, she had listed herself as the primary author and him as the secondary author when she submitted it, since she had made significant revisions. Ye-young immediately understood that the professor was trying to take credit for Do-won's work. Although speechless with anger, Do-won simply said, "I'm driving. We'll talk about this later." When Ye-young got home, she planned to comfort Do-won, assuming he might be out drinking to drown his sorrows. Little did she know he'd already done that. The next day, at the hospital cafeteria, everyone looked like they'd just returned from battle, hair disheveled and struggling to stay awake. Nam Kyung was still preoccupied with her ambiguous relationship, stuck in the cycle of wanting to break up, but also clinging on. After sitting down, Sabai informed the group about the upcoming stretch of back-to-back shifts they were facing. "Better eat up now, because this might be the last meal you get all day," she said. Everyone hurriedly started eating. Back at the hospital, Do-won saw an article about the project he was supposed to co-author with Professor Yoon Myong. Professor John appeared and asked Do-won if he knew Yoon My was presenting the project. Overhearing, Yoon My chimed in, telling Do-won she'd forgotten and should have emailed him about it. Yi-young, listening to her saccharine tone, was so furious she wanted to smash her keyboard. Suddenly, a nurse rushed in to tell Yi-young that her father's patient was hemorrhaging and needed immediate surgery. Yi-young frantically asked where the patient's husband was. "He's out buying shoes, so it'll be at least 30 minutes before he's back to sign the consent form," was the reply. Yi-young had to wait anxiously for the husband's return. The husband arrived and was informed that his wife was in surgery under the professor's care. He paced nervously, wringing his hands. Yi-il-der-goat wasn't having a much better time. He thought he was finally going home after 3 days without a shower. Instead, Dr. Terzim called him back because patient Dong-zin was feeling unwell and needed an ultrasound. The ultrasound results were normal, as usual, but Dong-zin was still uneasy because Da-hai had performed the scan rather quickly. Yi-il reassured her that Da-hai was very skilled. She could read an ultrasound accurately with her eyes closed, he said. To further reassure the patient, Yi-il offered to perform another ultrasound himself, albeit more slowly and thoroughly. Dong-zin admitted her anxiety stemmed from worrying about potential complications with her pregnancy. Yi-il, understanding her concerns, meticulously re-examined her. Back in Yi-young's surgery, she rushed out to inform the husband that his wife was hemorrhaging and the placenta needed to be removed. "In the worst-case scenario, we may have to remove her uterus to save her life," Yi-young explained. "We need you to sign the consent form immediately so we can proceed." After hesitating, the husband signed. Do-won's team and Professor John quickly inserted a balloon to stop the bleeding, successfully preserving the uterus. After the surgery, Professor John informed the husband that the bleeding had been stopped. "Due to uterine contractions, the bleeding stopped, and we were able to save the uterus. Luckily, we didn't have to remove it," he said. The husband profusely thanked the doctors. "I thought my heart was going to stop." As his wife was wheeled out of the operating room, he walked beside her bed, praising their unborn child, much to everyone's relief. Then, the husband suggested his wife should rest up and they could try for a second child. This caused Yi-young to explode, calling him a jerk. "How can you say something like that at a time like this, you idiot?" she raged. Everyone was stunned, and Yi-young continued her tirade, feeling thoroughly vindicated. Do-won, meanwhile, wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Everyone around them grinned, pleased to see the inconsiderate husband put in his place. The next day, while sleeping, Yi-il-der-goat was again disturbed by a nurse informing him that the same expectant mother needed another ultrasound. Despite his exhaustion, he remained committed to his work. This time, however, during the scan, he detected something unusual. He told Tim to call the professor, confident in his finding. After Professor Young-min arrived and performed another ultrasound, she confirmed the anomaly in the fetus, acknowledging its subtlety. Dong-zin would need surgery, but with Professor Young-min's skill, she would be in good hands. After successfully delivering the baby, Professor Young-min reassured the patient by detailing the newborn's vital statistics. Seeing Dong-zin's lingering anxiety, the professor shared a story about her own 70-year-old mother. "My mother still worries about me constantly, even though I'm grown. She always reminds me to eat well and not drive at night because it's dangerous. I used to find it annoying until I had my own daughter. Now I do the same thing. Worrying about your child while they're still in the womb is just the beginning." The professor advised Dong-zin to view her worry as a sacrifice for the joy of watching her child grow, offering her some comfort. Grateful, Dong-zin asked where she could find the male doctor who performed the thorough ultrasound. She wanted to give Yi-il a gift as a token of her sincere appreciation. Meanwhile, Yi-il was admiring the first baby he had ever helped deliver by cutting the umbilical cord. Despite his fatigue, the sight filled him with emotion, which he shared with a senior cardiologist. Suddenly, he wondered if a blood oxygen saturation level of 90% was concerning. The senior cardiologist, seemingly relishing the opportunity, began grilling Yi Il with complex questions, as if he had been waiting for this moment. After the interrogation, the cardiologist admitted that he had no first-year residents in his department to quiz. "I just saw you, Ju, so I took the chance to experience what it's like to teach those first years a lesson." Everyone had good news except for Yi Young's sister, Ju Young. She was devastated after receiving news from the hospital. Her 2 retrieved eggs had failed to develop after IVF, diminishing her chances of becoming a mother. At the convenience store near the hospital, Nam Kyung was equally distraught because her on-again, off-again boyfriend hadn't replied to her messages. Sabai joined her, and Nam Kyung warned, "Don't say anything, I'm not in the mood to argue." However, Sabai had come to apologize. The professor had scolded her for the data they both compiled. Missing Nam Kyung's portion, Sabai had corrected and submitted it herself. Expecting another fight, Nam Kyung was surprised when Sabai apologized, saying it wasn't her fault. "If I had examined patient Dongdu the other day, you wouldn't have been scolded." Touched, Nam Kyung also apologized. "I shouldn't have talked about you behind your back to the patient." Sabai hadn't known about this, having missed the conversation. Now that it was out in the open, both rescinded their apologies and resumed their usual bickering like best friends. The following day at the hospital, Do-won and Yi Young attended the recognition ceremony for the research Do-won had done but was denied credit for. While Yi Young was in the restroom, Professor Yoon Myong approached Do-won and attempted to bribe him over the project, offering it as compensation for his research and hoping he would let the matter drop. She said without hesitation, "You must be upset. To make it up to you, I'll help you with another project next time." Yi Young, unable to hold back any longer, stepped forward and said directly, "I've heard you mention this issue twice now, and yet you haven't apologized once." Professor Yoon Myong feigned innocence, turning away before muttering an apology to Dogon. Likely because she'd already been called out by Yi Young, she'd forgotten to apologize to Dogon. Even Do-won was impressed by Yi Young's boldness. Do-won was worried Yi Young would get in trouble for confronting a professor. Unconcerned, Yi Young replied, "I'm still quitting, it doesn't matter. What about you? Are you some kind of saint that you don't know where to draw the line?" Do-won had a reputation in the hospital for being easygoing. Liking this side of Yi Young, Do-won asked her to repeat what she'd said the other day. Yi Young thought he meant, "I like you." Instead, he was referring to the string of curses she'd unleashed on her terrible husband the day before. So the two of them vented their frustrations together, like a secret office rendezvous. It was a new week at the hospital. Having just finished a week-long rotation in obstetrics, a first-year resident was recounting his experiences to a friend. "There are some real characters in OB," he said. One resident reacted to a woman in labor like it was no big deal. Another was so overly concerned she was coaching the patient through delivery like she was giving birth herself. He continued. There was this one senior resident whose blood pressure was probably higher than the patient's during labor. It was hard to tell who was actually giving birth. And the last one? Totally apathetic. A patient in serious pain wanted to be examined, but the resident just brushed her off, saying everything was fine. He concluded, chaotic, but honestly, it was a pretty good rotation. The two interns were so engrossed in their conversation they didn't realize the OB professors were sitting nearby, eavesdropping. Professor Diaru thought to himself, "I've got my eye on this kid." Meanwhile, in the internal medicine department, the first-year residents were practicing surgical stitching on models. Everyone was praising Yi Young's skills, calling her a natural. Restless, she replied, "What good is being good at stitching?" Anyone who knew Diaru Yuan would be shocked. Yi Young glanced over and saw Nam Kyung's new designer bag. Nam Kyung boasted, "It's the only one in the country, and I had to buy it on installment." Yi Young quipped, "It looks like something a grandma would carry." Nam Kyung retorted indignantly, "What do you know about fashion?" Despite her criticism, when everyone was called away to work, Yi Young snatched Nam Kyung's bag to try it on. Yi Il returned to retrieve his phone, startling her, but she smoothly struck a pose for a selfie as if nothing had happened. While on her way to an assignment, Nam Kyung ran into two professors. They stopped her, saying, "It seems Nam Kyung has made a good impression on the first-year team." They recounted how they had overheard some positive comments about the senior residents from the interns while sitting outside the hospital earlier. They praised Nam Kyung and encouraged her to treat the new interns well, reminding her that the department's smooth operation depended on them. Professor Diru asked his colleague, "Do you think that intern from earlier is really all right?" Meanwhile, the intern in question was struggling with a new patient, a military officer. The patient was confused, saying he hadn't had an EKG the last time he was there. As the intern fumbled, trying to ascertain the patient's symptoms, Dr. Kai Hong arrived to check on the situation. He asked the intern about the recorded symptoms, and just then, Nam Kyung appeared. Holding the patient's chart, she asked if his name was Sun. The intern had somehow managed to correctly record the name, but entered the wrong age, listing the young-looking officer as 89 years old. As a result, Nam Kyung dragged the flustered intern away for a lecture. Later, still shaken, the intern, seeing Dr. Kai Hong free, invited him to lunch. Since they knew each other, the invitation wasn't unusual. However, Dr. Kai Hong, preferring a simpler meal to the pizza Sun suggested, countered with an invitation to a nearby ox bone soup restaurant. Kids these days prefer ox bone soup over fast food. Meanwhile, after being thoroughly lectured by Nam Kyung, the intern profusely thanked her, praising her for being different from other first-year internal medicine residents. "I'm so grateful you pointed out my mistakes. Unlike some of the other residents, you didn't just yell at me." Nam Kyung inquired further and discovered the culprit who yelled at the interns was Yi Young. After several months on the job, the once overly eager first-year resident, Yi Il, had matured. He was constantly being paged by the but now, his enthusiasm had waned. He complained, "Why do they keep calling me? I just examined the patient earlier, and their condition has nothing to do with obstetrics." Yi Il scolded the staff, "Don't assume every woman with abdominal pain needs an OB consult." The staff fired back, "You're the one who told us to page you every time, so we wouldn't waste any time." Yi Il, remembering he had indeed said that, conceded, "We're really busy now, so please try to limit the calls." In contrast to Yi Il's busyness, Sabai seemed oblivious. She informed Dr. Park, a pediatric surgeon, that there were no surgeries scheduled until tomorrow, suggesting he take a break. 5 minutes later, Sabai frantically called Dr. Park back, saying an emergency C-section was needed. Dr. Park, who hadn't even had a chance to sit down, rushed back to the OR. He silently cursed the obstetrics department. After successfully delivering the baby, he confronted Sabai. "Everything was fine with the patient and the baby. Why did you report it as an emergency?" He was yelling at the wrong person. Sabai responded, "If everything is fine, why are you upset? You should be happy." Before he could fully express his frustration, he was called away for another surgery. Meanwhile, Yi Young was being reprimanded by Dr. Ham, the anesthesiologist, for requesting pain relief for her patient every 30 minutes. "Can't you combine the doses?" he asked. Just then, the patient cried out in pain again. Dr. Ham had to administer more pain relief, despite having just scolded Yi Young. "Are we there yet?" Nam Kyung and the intern were admitting a patient with Professor Pilu. The patient's son explained, "My mother doesn't want surgery if she knows she has cancer. I'm hoping the professor can tell her she's just having surgery for a cyst." He explained that because 3 family members had died from cancer, his mother would refuse treatment if she knew the truth. He had struggled to even get her to the hospital. After agreeing to the request, the professor told the 2 younger doctors, "That patient is the lady who sells pancakes at the Pai Ong Nam market. Every year, she donates 100 million won to the pediatric department. That's why Professor Pill wanted to come and greet her." He cautioned them to be careful. "Don't let her know she has cancer, or she won't have the surgery." That evening, since Do-won had some free time, he treated the first-year internal medicine team to Korean BBQ. Everyone complained about other departments taking up their time. Dogon responded, "It's the same with OB. They're always hogging the operating rooms. It goes both ways. Just eat and don't talk about work." After everyone said goodbye, Do-won announced he needed to return to the hospital. Moments later, he reappeared, walking alongside Yi Young on her way home. She asked, surprised, "Why did you go that way?" Do-won stammered, I forgot the way. I was worried about you walking alone in the dark. It's not safe. What if you run into trouble? Ye-young replied, I'd just grab their hair, pull their ears, and slap them silly. Now she's a thug, not one of those would-be robbers. Meanwhile, at Ye-young's sister's house, her brother-in-law and sister are enjoying some marinated crab. Ju-young tells her husband, I'm going to try to eat a lot so I have the strength to keep trying for a baby and make that son gone worry. He reminds her that last time was supposed to be the final attempt. It's clear Ju-young is determined to have a baby. Hearing Ye-young return, Dong-do urges her husband to hide the marinated crab before the crab addict sees it. When Ye-young arrives, she sees her sister and brother-in-law sitting together with nothing but a bowl of rice and seaweed. Feeling sorry for her sister, she exclaims, treat yourself better, buy something delicious to eat. The couple thinks they've fooled the crab addict, but they're wrong. Later that evening, Ye-young is caught red-handed by Do-won, happily munching on marinated crab with rice. He wonders how she knew about the crab. She honestly explains, when I came in, I saw soy sauce stains on the table but no dipping sauce. Plus, it smelled better than regular soy sauce. I knew there had to be crab somewhere in the house. Do-won explains, it's your sister's favorite. My brother waited in line to buy it from her favorite place. Ye-young says, I only ate a leg. I'm full, I was just tasting it. Do-won knows she's craving more. She's even picking at a crab leg with barely any meat on it. Do-won says, if you like it, I'll buy some for you next time. Ye-young lights up like a kid given candy. She claims she doesn't like him, but her affection probably just increased by 1%. The next day, before his upcoming shift, Do-won requests 3 days of leave, leading everyone to ask him for surgery favors. The professors promise not to bother him during his 3-day trip to Taiwan if he just performs the gone procedures. At noon, while withdrawing money together, Sa-bai and Diang receive urgent news. Sa-bai rushes to see Dr. Park in pediatrics, hoping he can accept one more child. The ward looks like it could squeeze in another baby. Dr. Park exasperatedly explains, pediatrics is overflowing. That empty space isn't a parking spot where you can just put another kid. Suddenly, a call comes in requesting Dr. Park's assistance with a surgery. He warns Sa-bai not to do anything rash. The moment he leaves, Sa-bai quickly parks a baby's crib in the empty spot. She immediately calls Diang back, confirming that there's now room for the child and the surgery can proceed. Next up, it's Ye-young's turn to take action. She waits outside the current surgery room to ask Dr. Ham for a favor. There's an emergency C-section in the obstetrics department, and she wants anesthesiology to give up their operating room. However, obstetrics' reputation for constantly commandeering operating rooms precedes them, leaving Dr. Ham feeling helpless. Giving up the room would delay all other surgeries. Last night, because of obstetrics, all other departments were stuck waiting on anesthesiology. Seeing Ye-young persistently pleading, Dr. Ham softens and tells Sang-hong to postpone his surgery, as it's not urgent. Ye-young quickly informs the professor and promises to bring the patient in immediately. Meanwhile, the flirtatious Ye-il is no less busy, as he's once again bothered by the Last time, they at least had some scans and test results. This time, they have nothing, prompting Ye-il to snap at them. Do you think I'm part of the now? The delivery room is in chaos. I'm willing to help, but only after the provides all the basic tests and scans. It'll save everyone a lot of time. With that, Ye-il walks away coolly, leaving the staff impressed. It's hard to believe Wu used to be clueless, but now he looks like a real fox. That night, Chief Resident Nam Kyung finally gets to relax and eat some chicken, a gift from the emergency patient Sa-bai and Ye-young helped earlier. Ye-young exclaims, "This is heaven. Finishing work and getting to eat boneless chicken. I'm too lazy to spit out bones anymore," adds Nam Kyung, surprised by the newfound camaraderie. Mid-feast, Do-won appears, reminding everyone to keep an eye on the upcoming surgeries and procedures. He's off to Taiwan for a short vacation. Everyone chimes in. "Don't worry, we've got this." Their confidence is short-lived. Before half a day passes, they're all standing outside Do-won's office room 54B, needing his input. Every case seems to require the chief resident's presence. Everyone sighs in frustration. Nam Kyung receives a text message and sighs again. "Why is everyone looking for the chief resident, but the intern is looking for me?" she's finally experiencing what Dr. Gu goes through. Everyone sighs a third time. Meanwhile, the intern, Jin, is nervously apprehensive. He musters the courage to tell a patient, "I was told not to tell you that you have cancer." Whether from nerves or a slip of the tongue, Jin blurts out, "This time, you're having cancer surgery instead of cyst surgery," leaving the patient's son facepalming and thinking, "Well, that's blown it." Professor Yo and Noam Kyung arrive to apologize. The patient, a pancake vendor, scolds them. "You were going to operate without telling me what was wrong. Do you think I'm stupid?" Her son quickly explains, "I asked them to do it. They weren't trying to hide anything." Professor Yo reassures her, "Your cancer is in its early stages. The surgery is relatively simple, and there's no need to worry about major symptoms. I recommend you have the surgery. You still have a long life ahead of you." After some thought, the patient agrees, swayed by their honesty, or rather, the intern Jin's honesty. She requests Jin's presence in the operating room for peace of mind. Seeing the intern she mentors receiving so much praise, Naeum Kyung feels a pang of jealousy and vents to Yi-young. Unfortunately, Yi-young is sprawled on the sofa, laughing hysterically at something on TV, completely ignoring her. Frustrated, Naeum Kyung resists the urge to poke her with a pen like John Wick. The next day, at the start of her shift, Professor Seo tells Yi-young to keep an eye on the lobby and while she assists Professor Yin. No sooner are the words spoken than Yi-young gets a critical case, a pregnant Russian woman. The challenge? The patient speaks neither Korean nor English. Despite Yi-young's efforts, she only manages to learn the patient's name. After an ultrasound, Yi-young calls Professor Seo, reporting that the patient's water has broken, but she's not her patient. The professor tells her to prep for surgery, promising to wrap things up and join her shortly. Meanwhile, intern Jin is participating in his first surgery, specifically chosen by the patient. Nam Kyung is surprised that Professor Yo remembers Jin's name after only a few encounters, while he can't recall hers despite working together for months. The professor remarks, "Well, he's been getting a lot of praise from patients." Of course he remembers. Feeling warm, Professor Yo asks Nam Kyung to fan him. Instead, she fans herself. Jin and the professor exchange bewildered glances. He meant for her to fan the patient while he closed the incision. "I don't remember you always being this funny." Even after the surgery, he continues to tease Nam Kyung, dramatically fanning himself as if he's about to faint. Seeing her junior, Jin, chuckling beside her, Nam Kyung scolded him soundly. She figured if she was getting chewed out, he should be too. He immediately sobered up. Back with Yi-young, she was carefully checking on her patient. While examining the cervix, she discovered a baby's foot had already emerged. Panicked, she urgently called for the professor to come and perform an emergency C-section, even though he was still occupied with another patient. Currently, all the surgeons and professors were fully booked with surgeries. Professor Seo had no choice but to ask the nurse to try and reach Professor Yoon My-ong. Although he didn't particularly like her, he was out of options. Yi-young was terrified because she'd never been in an operating room without a senior physician overseeing her. Seeing her anxiety, Dr. Ham comforted her. "I know you're scared, but if you start crying, we'll have to start all over again." Although Dr. Park from Pediatrics came to assist, he couldn't offer much help. It was all up to Yi-young. After composing herself, Yi-young mustered all her courage, grabbed the scalpel, and made the first incision. Suddenly, a deeper incision was made from outside. Unexpectedly, Do-won, who was supposed to be on vacation, appeared in the operating room, causing Yi-young's anxiety to return. With him there, everything would be all right. It turned out that a few hours earlier, in room 54, the Objin, about to go to sleep, had come face to face with Do-won and almost kissed him. He had overslept and missed his flight. His vacation plans ended on the very first day. It seemed things were a little awkward. Back in the present, by the time Professor Seo arrived, everything was almost finished. Do-won just needed to stitch up the patient, except for the baby. Because the baby's blood oxygen levels were low at birth, Dr. Park had to immediately administer oxygen and perform CPR. After a while of dedicated effort, the baby finally cried, making everyone breathe a sigh of relief. Only then did Yi-young's worry subside, and she immediately hugged Dr. Ham. Seeing this, Professor Seo remarked that Yi-young was no longer sterile and should take the opportunity to rest. They continued to hug, with Do-won witnessing the scene. he probably wasn't too thrilled. That night, while resting at the hospital, Nam Kyung received a call from her ex-boyfriend informing her that he was at the hospital. She immediately went to see Dr. Kai Hong to inquire about a patient named Ro Suk-hui. After checking, Dr. Kai Hong found nothing unusual with the patient, just needing another week of rest. He also wondered why a head injury patient was related to the obstetrics department. Nam Kyung confessed that it was her ex-boyfriend, which is why she was asking. After getting the information, Nam Kyung went to her ex-boyfriend's side to comfort his mother that he would be okay. She tried to hold his hand and rekindle their relationship, but Didong refused and withdrew his hand. Nam Kyung asked if he was still angry with her. Didong apologized for not replying to her messages. He was afraid that if he read them, he would end up responding. Nam Kyung asked, "It was just an argument. Why did you have to go this far? To ignore me until now?" Didong reminded her that if she said they should break up one more time, it would be over. And the last time was that time. He explained that he'd tried to endure each time she said they should break up just because she felt upset. But those words were genuinely hurtful and not something to be said lightly just because she was angry. Moreover, he knew that after getting angry, she had gone on blind dates behind his back. He just hadn't said anything. So, this time, when Nam Kyung suggested breaking up, he didn't feel any sadness. He could finally hate her instead of hating himself. As he was about to leave, Nam Kyung told him to call her anytime, not as friends or exes, but because they had been together for 7 years, and she wanted to help. Didong agreed, treating her as a close doctor. On the surface, he pretended that everything was fine. But as Didong left, Nam Kyung cried as if she had never cried before. She regretted not valuing her love more. Only after losing it did she realize its worth, all because she had said those words in anger. In that emotional state, she ran into her intern, GenZ, and despite wanting to cry, she couldn't anymore. After the surgery, Yi-young texted Do-won, asking him to buy her a coffee. While waiting for him, it suddenly started to rain. An umbrella approached, and Yi-young thought it was Do-won. But it was Dr. Ham from anesthesiology, shielding her from the rain. Noticing she seemed a bit dazed since the surgery, he had bought her a coffee and asked if she would like to have dinner with him. This tender scene was unexpectedly witnessed by Do-won, who arrived with the coffee Yi-young had asked for. The next day at the hospital, Sabai was nervously reminding Dr. Ham to be careful with the anesthesia and intubation. "My teeth are veneers. I'm afraid you'll damage them." The reason for Sabai's surgery was that some time ago, while discussing cases with Professor Ro, she had suddenly collapsed. An examination revealed a large tumor in her abdomen, so Professor Yo recommended surgery. For the first time seeing their friend ill, the 3 senior residents, instead of worrying, were more preoccupied discussing how large the tumor was, saying it was visible just by looking. Upon arriving at the operating room, Yi-il told Da-hai that he was Sabai's family member. Sabai didn't want her mother to know, fearing it would be a hassle. The other 2 were there for moral support. Unexpectedly, Da-hai shooed them all away. Before Sabai could fully process her anxiety, Nam Kyung appeared, saying, "You know how to put this on, right?" referring to the surgical cap. Sabai immediately cried out, wanting a different nurse. Although they heard the scream, Yi-young and Yi-il dismissed it as some strange noise, doubting it was Sabai. The next morning at the hospital, Da-hai and Yoon-mai felt like something was missing. Yoon-mai looked at her watch and realized that Do-won should have been there by then. Usually, everyone was aware of his schedule, so this was unusual. It turned out that the previous day, Do-won had seen Yi-young sharing an umbrella with someone else, and he was jealous. He'd used the excuse of oversleeping to give Yi-young a ride to work, likely afraid of losing her to someone else. On the way, Do-won asked how much Yi-young still owed the bank. After deducting everything, she probably had around 30 million won left to pay. Hearing him ask, Yi-young snapped, "I'm not borrowing money from you, so why are you asking?" She then asked him to stop by a bakery to buy Sabai a Yoon-mai style cake. After visiting Sabai at the hospital, Yi-young was thanked for the cake, while Nam Kyung was scolded. "Because of your careless bandaging and sloppy stitching." Before she could finish, Yi-il interrupted. "You must be feeling better. You were snoring like a chainsaw this morning. How's that fake stomach of yours doing?" Sabai immediately replied, "I'm fine. You guys can go." Just as her stomach grumbled loudly, followed by some significant flatulence under the covers. It seemed her gut was indeed okay. Just outside the door, Professor Seo called Nam Kyung, asking her to buy a cake for a 100-day celebration. Nam Kyung immediately delegated the task to Yi Young. Yi Young, excitedly anticipating some sort of anniversary celebration, received further information. It turned out that the patient, Don-do, was celebrating 100 days in the hospital, hence the cake. Not long after enjoying some cake, the whole crew ordered tteokbokki spicy rice cakes for Sabai, who was sick and on a soft food diet. The only problem was, Sabai showed up like a ghost in the 7th lunar month before anyone could dig in. I could smell the spicy rice cakes from 10 kilometers away. As tempting as it was, I couldn't have any. Sabai just sat there, instructing everyone on the best way to enjoy it, while casually inquiring about patient medical records. Yi Young was irritated. "If you miss work so much, why don't you just do my shift? Let me lie in bed and get my money's worth." Yi Young, annoyed by Sabai's constant chatter, gave him a banana to tide him over and curb his tteokbokki craving. Karma hit Yi Young right after the meal. Her current patient was experiencing significant arm pain, and Yi Young was clueless about how to alleviate it. The professor advised the patient to lie on her back, suggesting it would help. However, the patient worried that doing so might cause her to faint. Professor Seo acknowledged that this was a possibility. Just as they were struggling to comfort the patient, the Dongjang Jiji patient from the nearby bed, who was celebrating her baby's 100th day, chimed in. "Did you hear that lying on your side like this can prevent pregnant women from experiencing too much pressure and fainting? Is that right? You must have read something about it online, like on a Tiger Mom blog, right?" she said, demonstrating a remarkable understanding of pregnant women's anxieties. The Dongjang Jiji patient's intervention helped Professor Seo and Yi Young reassure their patient, who finally lay down to ease her arm pain. Despite this, Yi Young was reprimanded for her lack of knowledge. Whenever the patient asked a question, Yi Young could only say she didn't know, and she hadn't even thought to consult the professor. Consequently, Professor Seo ordered Yi Young to study and be quizzed a few hours later. Already short on time, Yi Young now had even less, having been thoroughly scolded. Imitating Professor Seo's mannerisms, she immediately went to comfort another patient. After her shift, she bumped into Dr. Ham from the anesthesiology department. Seeing her trying to slip away, Dr. Ham pointed out that it was rude of her not to reply to his text messages. Yi Young claimed she'd been too busy and had simply forgotten. Dr. Ham then asked if she was free sometime, as they had previously planned to have dinner together. Mid-conversation, they ran into Do-won. Seeing his girlfriend being chatted up, Do-won interrogated Dr. Ham. Dr. Ham smoothly suggested Do-won go ahead, promising they would catch up later. Do-won, though feigning nonchalance as he pressed the elevator button, was clearly jealous. Yi Young later consulted Nam Kyung and Yi Il with a hypothetical scenario. What would you do if a friend was asked out by someone they liked, but they already had feelings for someone else? Nam Kyung suggested going to dinner, while Yi Il advised declining the invitation. He reasoned, "He definitely likes your friend. If she doesn't feel the same, it's best to be upfront." After this sage advice, Yi Il liberally applied cologne, explaining that his first love was visiting, and he wanted to make a good impression. He described her as intelligent, with a charming smile, and a fondness for spicy tteokbokki, leading Yi Young and Nam Kyung to immediately think of Sabai. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear. Just then, Sabai arrived. Meanwhile, Yi Il, after encountering his senior, was feeling hopeful, but his joy was short-lived. It turned out his first love was only visiting to discuss her doctoral dissertation with a professor, and had simply remembered to see Yi Il while she was there. Yi Il, eager to believe she held special feelings for him, was quickly corrected when she addressed him informally. "Call me senior, not UI," she reminded him. Mid-sentence, she received a call from a doctor at the Andong Children's Hospital. Yi Il, upon inquiring, was brutally rebuffed by his first love, who lied and claimed to have a boyfriend. Just like that, his dream of rekindling their connection was swiftly shattered. Heartbroken, he wandered the crowded streets, only to run into the nosy Sabai. Her professional curiosity clearly outweighed any post-surgical pain she might have been experiencing. Sabai, scratching her head, asked Yi Il about his itchy scalp as they walked. Yi Il, looking at her, replied, "Now you know." It's because you haven't washed your hair in a while. And that smell. Unmistakable. He then wondered why Yi-il was in his patient's room. Inside, they found Professor Ju persuading a newly admitted patient to undergo surgery. Unexpectedly, the patient turned out to be Nam Kyung's mother. The professor, beaming, exclaimed, "You should have told me sooner." Nam Kyung's mother was impressed by the hospital and relieved that her daughter worked in such a good environment. If only she knew how clumsy Nam Kyung was, she'd probably faint at the sight of her daughter's stitching. In contrast to everyone else's cheerfulness, Yi-young appeared distraught and exhausted. Unsure how to ease her patient's anxiety, the Dongjang Jjiji maternity patient, Dongjang Du, appeared, claiming to have a solution for Yi-young's patient's insomnia. Instead of medication, she presented them with a paper crane. She had become something of a fertility goddess in the ward, reassuring the previously anxious expectant mothers. Impressed by Dongjang Du's knowledge, Yi-young pulled her aside to ask for advice on how to help another patient, Miss Lai, with constipation. Dongjang Du confidently replied, "You've come to the right person." She recommended prune juice as a natural remedy. That evening, Nam Kyung instructed her mother, "Since you're here, please keep quiet. Don't tell my colleagues anything. Keep it a secret, okay? And since your surgery is tomorrow, please stick to your diet." However, her mother promptly pulled out a stash of homemade dumplings and buns, enough to feed the entire hospital, leaving Nam Kyung exasperated and tearful. Despite her earlier warning, Nam Kyung's mother, while sharing a room with Sabai that night, couldn't resist recounting embarrassing stories about her daughter from high school. Although academically gifted, Nam Kyung had been isolated. Things improved slightly in college, but not significantly. Knowing her daughter now had good friends at the hospital put her mind at ease. Lying in the bed below, Nam Kyung tried in vain to silence her mother. Her mother teased, "Weren't you just telling me to go home and sleep? Why are you here?" Nam Kyung retorted, "If I weren't here, the whole hospital would know everything about me by tomorrow." The next day, Professor Du avoided Sabai like the plague, fearing a repeat of her fainting spell. Meanwhile, the rest of the staff were enjoying the dumplings and buns Nam Kyung's mother had made. According to Sabai's investigation, Nam Kyung's family dumpling shop was quite famous locally. Just after praising the food, Nam Kyung's mother texted her for Sabai's address, having clearly bonded with her daughter's colleague overnight. Amidst the chatter, Yi-young checked her watch and signaled to Nam Kyung, "It's time to take your mother to surgery." Despite being surrounded by skilled doctors and nurses, Nam Kyung couldn't help but worry. Meanwhile, the patient who had become a source of support for the other expectant mothers in the ward was heartbroken, sobbing uncontrollably. She had lost her third child. It turned out Yi-il had asked Do-won to perform a chromosomal test, which revealed that the baby no longer had a heartbeat. It seemed the fetus had died in the mother's womb. Everyone present could only watch the patient grieve alone. She couldn't even eat. They simply instructed Yi-young to prepare the consent forms. Meanwhile, Sa had returned to work and was caring for Nam Kyung's mother after her surgery. Now, it was her turn to repay her friend for administering the pain medication earlier. Though tired, Nam Kyung's mother still reminded her daughter to eat and rest properly. Even as a doctor, she needed to take care of herself first. Back with Yi-young, the patient, Don-do, had no appetite after losing her third child. Seeing Yi-young with the consent forms, she proactively took them and signed, agreeing to the surgery to remove the fetus. To comfort her, Yi-young told her about her older sister. "My sister, who's always had difficult pregnancies, worked so hard to carry a child. She was afraid that if she didn't eat, her baby wouldn't either. Even if she had to force herself, she would eat. That way, at least, she wouldn't have to dwell on other sad things." Although grieving the loss, Don-do forced herself to eat a little to prepare for the surgery the next day, thanks to Yi-young's efforts, repaying the kindness Don-do had shown her before. Early the next morning, Nam Kyung and her mother were chatting. Nam Kyung casually mentioned a professor who often scolded her, piquing her mother's curiosity. "Who is this person? How dare they raise their voice at my daughter? If I meet her, I'll give her a piece of my mind. Speak of the devil, and he shall appear." Professor Kong appeared behind them. Professor Kong asked why Nam Kyung was there. Her mother stepped forward, asking sternly, "Are you the professor mentoring my Nam Kyung?" The two went back and forth, and just when it seemed like a confrontation was brewing, Nam Kyung's mother did a complete 180. I know my daughter has shortcomings. I hope you can continue to guide her until she excels. What a supportive mother. After being discharged, she reminded Nam Kyung to thank her friends, who also enjoyed the dumplings she had made. She expressed how happy she was to have such a filial daughter, a feeling she hadn't experienced so intensely since Nam Kyung was in middle school. Just a few heartfelt words from her mother brought Nam Kyung to tears. No matter how old she got, she would always be her mother's child. Back in the dorm, Do-won joined the first-year team to enjoy Nam Kyung's mother's dumplings. Suddenly, Yi-young's phone rang. Nam Kyung answered, and it was Yi-young on the other line. I left my phone at your place. I'll come get it. Sabai wondered if Yi-young was with someone. Nam Kyung had a feeling she was. She asked before if a friend was being pursued, but Yi-young doesn't have any other friends besides us. Do-won, listening in, froze, worried about some guy trying to steal his girl. Meanwhile, Dr. Ham had invited Yi-young to a fancy restaurant, reserving a private room. She thought it was a date, but thankfully, a few first-year students from another department were also present. Dr. Ham explained it was a celebratory dinner for the difficult surgery they all worked on together. After the meal, the understanding friends excused themselves, leaving Yi-young and Dr. Ham alone. Dr. Ham tentatively started asking questions. I was worried you'd think this was a date, so I invited them, even though I don't think I actually did. Yi-young assured him it was fine and that it was fun. Dr. Ham then seriously asked who she liked, causing Yi-young to jump, exclaiming she hadn't told anyone. So, the rumors were true. Dr. Ham remarked that his team often had good foresight within the hospital. He had noticed Yi-young's fondness for Do-won through their work together, but he just wanted to confirm his suspicions. Despite knowing this, he still tried to gauge his chances, but in Yi-young's eyes, Do-won was unequivocally number one. Hearing her answer, Dr. Ham wished them ill fortune, hoping it might give him a chance. Back in her room, Yi-young saw Do-won's message, "Once you find your phone, find me." As a result, they ended up taking the bus home together. Yi-young then explained that Dr. Ham had invited her to dinner with the surgical team from the previous day. Hearing this, Do-won was visibly relieved, grinning like a child. Suddenly, Yi-young spotted a couple embracing and expressed her desire to be babied, making Do-won slightly embarrassed. Here, he asked uncertainly, but turning around, he found Yi-young already seated on a bench. It turned out to be a misunderstanding. Even though they were just sitting together, Do-won's heart rate spiked. He couldn't hold back any longer and looked directly into Yi-young's eyes.